men wish death upon me. Blood in my eye, dog, and I can't see. And I'm trying to be what I'm destined to be, and God's trying to take my life away. I put a hole in a friend of mine for messing around with me. My back on the wall, now you gon' see. Better watch how you talk when you talk about me, 'cause I'll come take your life away. Many men, many, 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 many men wish death upon me. Lord, I don't cry no more. Don't look to the sky no more. Have mercy on me. Now they was the guys putting money on my head. Go on and get your refund, mother, I ain't dead. I'm the diamond in the dirt that ain't been found. I'm the underground king and I ain't been crowned. When I rhyme, something special happen every time. I'm the greatest, something like Ali in his prime. I walk the block with the bundles, I've been knocked on the humble. Swing the ox when I rumble, show your butt what my gun do. Got a temper, do, go ahead, lose your head. Turn your back on me, get caught and lose your legs. I walk around, belt on my waist, chip on my shoulder till I do another song in your face. Do this beef ain't over. Many men, many, 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 many men wish death upon me. Lord, I don't cry no more. Don't look to the sky no more. Have mercy on me. Have mercy on my soul. Somewhere my heart turned cold. Have mercy on many men. Many, 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 many men wish death upon me. Sunny days wouldn't be special if it wasn't for rain. Joy wouldn't feel so good if it wasn't for pain. Death gotta be easy, 'cause life is hard. It'll leave you physically, mentally, and emotionally scarred. This is for my dudes on the block, twisting trees and cigars. For the dudes on lock, doing life behind bars. I don't see, only God can judge me, 'cause I see things clear. Quick, these crackers will give my black butt 100 years. I'm like Paulie and Goodfellas, you can call me the Dawn. Like Malcolm by any means with my
Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me.
Turn on your mind now, tune into the feed. We're planting digital flowers from a single tiny seed. Yeah, power to the collective in the data and the soul. The hive mind's getting louder, finding voice and control. Late night in Moscow, where nothing ever happens. Night blends in the moonlight, no escape. White night yonder, lurking knife in the door.
Paranoid searches for a full vision ride. Under surveillance, nowhere to hide. Influence creeps like blood on the floor. Fine line between peace and war. From campus to crypt, the script flips tragic. Mystic and twisted, magic turn manic. Walk through lingers, but the echo remain. Chains of the slain and eternal pain.
And here we go.
Welcome to the freak show, the best in town.
What's going on, Hive? I hope everybody's having an awesome day. Let me double check the audio. What's going on? I think the audio is coming in loud and clear here. You guys got me okay? One's in the chat if you can hear me loud and clear. Guys, I'm not going to lie. This is probably the most excited that I've ever been for a stream. I'm excited for every night here in the Hive. If this is your first time tuning in, I'm your host, Birdie. I go live weeknights at 7 p.m. Central. This is a contrarian thinking live stream. We think past the headlines. We question the narratives. We like to theorize, ask what if. We don't just nod along and clap along with the mainstream media. If something doesn't sit right, we come hang out here in the Hive. We have a discussion in the chat. I have the best mods on YouTube, being formerly known as Beck, Discord Dawn, Luna Bliss, and the UFO Dog. And we like to get past the point of the initial disagreement. As a society, it's something that we don't do very often, but in this little carved out corner of the internet, we strive to do so, and I think we do an excellent job at it. And tonight, I'm honored to have Jeffrey Gentry here in the Hive again for the second time. He was on last week, and we're not just going to be talking necessarily only theories or opinions. We're going to get a chance to hear from somebody who does this for real. This person has been on thousands of scenes, breaking down bloodstain patterns, reconstructing what happened, documenting evidence, even testifying in court as an expert. Jeffrey is an ABMDI certified medical death investigator and an IAI certified bloodstain pattern analyst, over 2 decades of experience. And what makes this even better is that he is incredible at breaking it down. He's got an open mind. He's very well spoken, obviously a very well educated man. And I think that we are in for an absolute treat this evening, getting the chance to talk with Jeffrey. Full transparency, I have a ton of slides lined up for him. I had texted him earlier in the week. I said, Jeffrey, this might be a little bit longer of a stream. Are you okay with that? He goes, let's do it. And he actually said, he's like, I want you to challenge me. He's like, I want the chat to challenge me. He's like, I'm going to go through. We'll talk about the possibilities, and, you know, don't be afraid to push back. So we got the green light on that, Hive. Obviously, we're going to do that in a, you know, respectful way. We can have some intensity to it, but let's not be a-holes. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring up Jeffrey right away so that we have as much time as possible together. But Hive, as I'm doing this, please, please, please hit that like button, share this out, hit subscribe. If you want to use the emojis in the chat, all you got to do is join Hive Plus. The mods will be dropping those links. And at the end, make sure you hang out for the entire stream. We're going to be putting people's questions up onto the screen for you to all ask Jeffrey anything we did not touch on. All right. Anybody that's got access to the emojis, let's see some LFGs in there. And without further ado, here is Mr. Jeffrey Gentry. How are you doing? Oh, hang on. That's on me. I had you muted. How are you doing?
Okay, I'm doing good now that I'm unmuted.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, man. I love the Dexter shirt too.
Oh, thank you. I thought it was appropriate considering the the topic.
Absolutely. And Hive, one of my mods, Jeffrey, just let me double check the audio. Sometimes I can hear it fine. I just want to make sure on the chat side, can somebody let me know if the audio is equal? And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to get going. Can you hear that rain behind me too, by the way? Can you hear anything coming through?
I can't hear it at all. It's nice and sunny here in California.
Oh, dude, it is pouring on us right now. I'm surprised you guys can't hear that. So, all right, the audio is all good. We got confirmation from the chat. Jeffrey, I'm going to go ahead and let you talk about yourself a little bit. I gave you a brief intro. Obviously, you've been on over 4,000 cases, 300 plus homicides, 350 suicides, 500 traffic accidents. Tell us a little bit about you and your career as a crime scene expert.
So I started out long time ago. I went to school for biochemistry. So my bachelor's degree is in biochemistry and molecular biology. So despite my appearance, I am 100% a science nerd. And then I went on to get a master's degree in administration. Out of college, I worked as a forensic autopsy technician. I was doing autopsies to gain experience for medical related career. And I love doing it. So I've done thousands of autopsies or assisted in thousands of autopsies. So I know not only the investigative side, but I know the autopsy room side. And then I also, out of college, worked in a forensic toxicology laboratory. So I've done all the chemistry testing for drugs and alcohol, testing all types of specimens. So I have that experience as well. And I went on after working in a toxicology laboratory to get a job as a death investigator, so a medical legal death investigator. And it took me quite a while, but then I became certified as a death investigator. And then I went on to gain more education in specifically bloodstain pattern analysis. There's only 60 certified, or right around 60 certified bloodstain pattern analysts in the world. So I feel very fortunate to have that experience and education that would allow me to become certified, and then I'll ultimately testify as an expert in bloodstain pattern analysis. But I am also certified as a crime scene analyst as well. So considering those three levels of education and certification, I think I'm the only person in the world that's certified as a death investigator, bloodstain pattern analyst, and crime scene analyst. And so thank you.
Dude, that is impressive. And again, I'm honored and I'm very grateful that you have not only been on the stream one time, but that you are back here tonight now after our first discussion, looking more into the crime scene photos, familiarizing yourself with the case. And for anybody that did not see that first episode, Jeffrey purposefully did not go and dive super deep into the case. He felt it would be, I don't know how you want to explain it. It'd be interesting to see an unbiased take when you're first seeing a lot of this stuff. And I appreciate that. I think a lot of people did.
Yeah, and I really like taking that approach, especially initially, just so I can kind of be caught off guard. I like the challenge. Like you mentioned, I get to testify in court every once in a while, and I really love doing it because it really tests your education, your skills. So when I do these kind of things, and the reason I like talking to people like yourself and your Hive is I want the abnormal questions because I want to be able to explain them. You guys don't get access to crime scenes or death investigation scenes like I do. And so we have to be able to remember that when we go into court, we're educating the jury. We're educating the jury, the judge, the attorneys on a discipline that most people don't have experience in, or some people that are on the juries have never seen a crime scene. They've never seen an autopsy. They've never investigated a death. So they don't really know what to expect. So as an expert, you're expected to be able to explain to people like your years of education in a very short amount of time and have it make sense. And so that's my job. And that's what I want to do for you guys, is be able to look at any evidence you want to present or any theories that you want to present. And then we will say, is that possible based on the evidence, or is it completely, ridiculous based on the evidence? And so that's what I want to do, is be able to educate your team as much as possible.
No. And like I said, we're all stoked to have you here, man. And, I do have one question that I did not ask you the first time, and then we're going to be diving into it. Like I said, I got a ton of slides, but I did not ask you the first time that you were on the stream, and I don't know how, because I'm very interested. I think I'd asked you how you got into this, but do you remember what your first crime scene was?
Ooh, yes, actually. So when I first started getting experience, I was working as an autopsy technician, and one of the investigators took me out to one of the death scenes. So it was a person that had, I think they had overdosed at a hotel. And I just thought it was great because you go into these crime scenes, you're like one of maybe 2 or 3 people that actually get to go into the scene, go through the crime scene tape. And once you're in there and you're following appropriate procedures, you kind of have free access to this scene. You get to explore, you get to look around, and I'm kind of nosy by nature. So I love digging around through things and looking for evidence and trying to figure out what happened. It's just fantastic. It's so fun. I mean, it sounds horrible, but crime scenes are really interesting. They're challenging. They're fun. It's awful that something bad has happened, but then you think, I've trained my whole life for this. I've, got all this experience, education, seen tons of scenes. So I like to put my education to the test and use it for good. And by the time that I get there, obviously there's nothing that I can do other than try to help these families who are going through, really the worst thing they've ever experienced in their life. I mean, if you have a relative that has died. So I like to go in there and do my best job possible and try to explain it to these family members who are going through a lot. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And I've obviously never trained for it. When I think of it, I feel like it would just be this very somber and eerie feeling at a death investigation. But to you, it's your job. So I'm sure you get used to it and you go in and, like you said, you're trying to figure out what the heck happened here so I can help this family, grieve and heal and find justice.
Yeah. And it kind of makes me think about like when I was going through a lot of the files, and Amber, my fiance, she's like totally dug into this. Like, she would stay up late at night for the last couple of weeks, just going through the body cam footage, the reports, and then she'll wake me up and be like, "Jeff, did you know this?" And I was like, "No, it's like 3 a.m. How the hell could I know this?" And so it's fantastic.
That's awesome.
But one of the things that we were talking about is like the police commentary in these body cams, like the police commentary, the coroner commentary. One of the things, for example, is them talking about like not having enough body bags. I don't know if you heard that commentary. So to your average person, that sounds horrible, right? I mean, they're out at a crime scene where deaths have occurred and they're kind of not poking fun at the deceased people, but just kind of like, oh my God, I don't have enough body bags. So it's not necessarily intended to, disrespect the families or disrespect the deceased. It's just part of the job. I mean, think about yourself and your normal day job, I don't know, like a mechanic, for example, they're out, they're working, they're having a hard time, they're out late, they're, all covered in grease, and then they realize they don't have the right tool. So it's like, I could see them totally like throwing something down and being like, well, damn, I don't have the right tool. So it's kind of the same thing. It's like, a body bag is obviously a tool of the trade. So if you don't have one, you're going to be, upset or make a joke or a comment. But at the same time, when you're working a case like that, where there's 4 people that are deceased and you realize that everything is going to be recorded and gone through like with a fine tooth comb, you got to be a little more cautious.
Yeah.
So like me, I've had moments where, you're out at a crime scene and you're talking to people and you realize that the family is one room over, and you're like, oh crap, I didn't realize that, I really wish somebody would have told me that. Cause you obviously tailor your commentary and your humor and to the environment. And so, whereas a lot of people might think that is super insensitive, to me, I kind of get it. I mean, having worked in this field for a long time, you don't mean to offend anybody. It's just, you're human and you have human comments and interactions with people. And so, but the flip side, you got to be really cautious what you do, and especially depending on the type of scene.
No, that analogy makes sense. I think, given what I just was saying, like if I was to think of myself at a crime scene, it'd be somber, it'd be eerie. I'm sure the same applies after you've been on a bunch of them. You're not really realizing at that moment there's going to be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people watching this body cam of me walking out of a crime scene and saying, hey, do you want some souvenir booties?
Right. Is my audio okay? I just had to switch out my mic a little bit.
Yeah, it sounds fine to me. If there was any glitching, you're all good now, but we got you loud and clear. So, okay, speaking of body cams, I have the 911 call body cam pulled up. And the reason why we're going to watch this is we're going to see Dylan Mortensen, who is obviously one of the surviving roommates that was on the second floor that had given the whole bushy eyebrows, the balaclava, and exiting out the sliding back door statement, right? She also says some other things that the state seems to forget this person said. So they'll cherry pick a little bit, in my opinion, right? And we're going to get into all that, Jeffrey. I got all these slides prepped, but let's go ahead and let's listen to what Dylan Mortensen says, her initial statement when the police officers show up to 1122 on November 13th.
In this
right around noon.
I have not heard yet.
Okay. So you have not heard this audio. You've only heard the 911 call.
Correct.
Okay. Here we go.
Okay, I'm going to start IDing all them.
Okay, Jeffrey. So right here is one of my first questions.
Okay.
Why, if this is 10 minutes after the 911 call, so this is 10 minutes after the 911 call came in for an unconscious person, they then show up, they walk inside, they find 2 victims upstairs, 2 victims in the second floor bedroom being Ethan and Xana. So now you have 4 homicides that seem so brutal. They're not even attempting life-saving treatment. Why are the EMS people getting turned away here?
At some point, the officers would realize that there is no chance for resuscitation. So, like initially, it's just chaos at crime scenes. I mean, you imagine officers rolling in; they have no idea what's going on, and in this case, they had no clue what was going on. Right? The initial information they got on 911 call is that there is an unresponsive person, so they don't realize that there's 4 deceased people in that house. So they're at a tremendous disadvantage going into this scene. So they don't realize that right away they should make this a crime scene. So that's number one. I mean, I kind of understand where the cops are coming from with this because they're just going into it completely blind. So they go in there. Once they realize what has happened, that's when they want to get everybody out as quickly as possible because they don't want to further contaminate that scene. Because every single thing that you do there, without shoe covers on, without gloves, without a mask on, you're potentially contaminating evidence. So that's number one, is getting that scene control, getting everybody out of the scene. And at some point during that, when the cops are dispatched, the EMS personnel are dispatched as well. So firefighters, paramedics. And if they say that there's multiple victims, then they're going to get multiple EMS personnel dispatched up to the scene. So at some point, once they realize like these people are deceased, we're not going to have the paramedics go in and further contaminate that scene. We're not going to, they might have like 1 or 2 paramedics go in there and just go around to each individual person and pronounce death. But then at the same time, they're going to record that interaction. They're going to watch where those people step. That way, if a footwear impression shows up later or blood transfer that you can't explain shows up later, they can explain that by looking at where people walked or how they interacted with that scene. But you still have to pronounce death legally, but you're not going to have an entire crew of like firefighters and paramedics go in there and potentially contaminate the scene. So that's why they're turning them away.
Okay. So you're saying this group of people, they're not letting them in. They don't want to contaminate it. Then Kathy Mabbitt, who's their coroner, shows up 5-6 p.m. later. Is that a long time for somebody to show up to pronounce death, being that it would most likely be the coroner to do so?
Well, the police officers, if they see the person has 0 signs of life, and if they have injuries that are so catastrophic that they are confident that that person is deceased, they can pronounce death. They can legally pronounce death. Usually it's going to be like a nurse, doctor, paramedic. In some states, the coroner pronounces death. I don't pronounce death in the jurisdiction that I work in. So sometimes if the coroner is the one that pronounces death, then they'll get them out to the scene as quickly as possible so they can pronounce. But in this scenario, I don't know exactly who pronounced death, but that would be a long time for the coroner to respond to pronounce, because obviously there's a gap in time. So you don't want the legal time of death to be so far off from the actual time of death. But it's not uncommon for the coroner to come out way later. Like I've had it where I've responded out to scenes, homicide scenes, and it takes them 25 or 24 hours to call the coroner's office out.
So what's the, like, don't you need the liver temperature to understand the time of death though?
In some scenarios, yes. So that would be ideal to have like a liver temperature or some form of measurement of these people's condition. But in this type of a scenario where you don't know who the suspect is, and there's potentially a lot of fragile evidence, like DNA evidence is fragile. Like it could be easily contaminated. It could be easily transferred from one place to another. And that could really throw some major problems in your investigation. So it's better to put things on hold and prevent people from going in versus potentially contaminating that scene. So there's a balance, right? I mean,
okay.
Do you want to have the coroner go in and get as much information from the body's condition to try to narrow down the time of death? Or do you want to potentially preserve DNA evidence that could link this unknown suspect to the crime scene? So in most cases, you want to preserve that evidence. That would be more critical.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you one more question on that topic, and then I'm going to let this play through. So Jeffrey, if you're at a crime scene, let's say you, for example, and you accidentally contaminate a crime scene, right? So what you just explained, let's say that occurs. What is best practice to do then?
Document
on your case.
Document it as best as you possibly can. Notify whoever the detective is that is working that case. But typically, they're not going to have the coroner come in until it's a stage in the investigation where you're not going to contaminate the scene. But there might be evidence on the body. Like, say, for example, if there's hairs on a deceased body and you are going through and you're being as careful as possible, but somehow you move that body and some of the hairs end up on your glove or something. You just want to document it. You want to make sure you photograph it, document it, put it in notes, tell the investigating agency what's going on. So that's how you cover those type of issues. I mean, anybody can make a mistake. Anybody can have, somebody can trip or like kick something over. Like, I went out to a scene the other day and there was a gun and a knife on the ground, and I was still responsible for the body was there. So, is it possible that walking through there you could like maybe not see it and kick a gun or something out of the way? I mean, that's a little far-fetched.
Yeah.
Ideally, you don't want to do that, but it can happen, right? And in that scenario, you just document it. You don't want to like put it back where it was and pretend it never happened, because that interaction, I could be transferring, DNA or contaminating blood evidence. And that, can really look complicated when you go to a trial, just trying to explain those things. And I mean, like, for example, the O.J. Simpson case, that's what happened is they screwed up on evidence. They, were mishandling evidence. And by them not like being straightforward about it, that's what really blew that case. So you want to be very upfront about any mistakes or errors or just moving things around when you shouldn't.
Yeah. I also think in the OJ case, one of the things that really led them astray is that they had their sights fixed on OJ and really never looked elsewhere. I don't know if you've heard the theory about his son. Not that we got to go down this whole rabbit hole. I'm happy to. I'm happy to go down the rabbit hole of his son. But in general, in addition to what you said, they also, they also didn't really look outside of OJ. Their sights were set on him.
Right. And I was, I told you I go on the Nancy Grace show every once in a while. And we were just talking about the Nancy Guthrie case. And obviously that investigation, they don't have a suspect yet. But, you got to be open to all possibilities. So like in any investigation, if you're going to be very thorough, you have to be open to all possibilities. So like, for example, this case, the Idaho 4, although you think you have the right person, you still have to open up that investigation to think of all possible theories. And you have to make sure that, along the way, you're shutting those doors. So like if, for example, somebody says like, the next door neighbor did it, or there was, blood somewhere else, you got to test that. You have to document it. You have to look into that, because when you go into court and the defense attorney brings that stuff up in front of a jury who can be, swayed one way or another, if you haven't looked into those possibilities, you're really screwing yourself when you go to court.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and we're going to get to that, because what I want to do now is I want to let you listen to this. Cause like you said, you only heard the 911 call. I want to have you listen to what the officer's body cam catch from Dylan and her initial statement. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. This first part's redacted. If you don't hear anything, whatever they say to this EMS squad, it's redacted. So let me get this full screen. Oop, wrong button. There we go. And here we go. So it's just redacted right now.
Do you think they were just mentioning his names, or?
I don't know. They redact really weird parts. I'm not sure if he's describing the scene. I'm not sure. Is he saying they're obviously not alive?
I don't know. I mean, they could be giving.
Thank you. No, you're good. Hang in there, brother. Thanks.
Sorry, go ahead. Finish that thought.
They're probably disclosing details that are critical to the investigation. And what happens during these investigations is the police are going to keep critical information tight to their investigation. Like, for example, they're not going to go disclosing to the general public that these are stab wounds initially, because when they're questioning, who they might think is a suspect, they want to see what that suspect is going to voluntarily share. And so if they share something that hasn't been released to the public, well, then that should be like your spidey senses should go off. You should be like, oh man, we got something good here, because nobody else knows this. How does this person have this information. So that's why a lot of information does not get shared to the general public at first. And I came to find out that, I told you I've talked to Kaylee's mom. And so I've come to find out that a lot of information was not shared to the family throughout the entire investigation. They're finding a lot of this stuff out now, 4 years later, which just blows me away. I can't believe that. But, that's just kind of how it works is, until the police feel like they can share all the information, they don't. And that's just part of the investigative process.
Yeah. And there's a couple people asking you, you did. And just to maybe give a quick elevator, story on that, you were on the stream the last time. And, I think you had described there were family friends of the Goncalves family that had said, hey, there's this guy on, the Birdie show or Hive show. You should check it out. And then they ended up reaching out to you. And
yeah. So I got an email from her and she just asked if we could talk. And, I was of course concerned that, maybe I'd offended somebody and that's never my goal. My goal is to educate. So, throughout this process, I'm looking at information. I'm not talking about anybody specifically. I'm not talking about the suspects. I'm not talking about the victim. I'm just looking at information and what can that information tell you? So I was obviously, I've worked in this industry for a long time and I work with families and I help them through this kind of stuff. And so I can totally sympathize with, the survivors of this kind of stuff, that it's really hard. And so, when we were talking, she actually said that she liked hearing the information that I had to present, that, she'd never really heard anybody go over the evidence because obviously there wasn't a trial. I think that they were really hoping for that because they wanted to hear all the information that the police had. They wanted to hear, an explanation. And they, obviously, and, in any case, families are going to want justice. And so I think that was nice for them to hear somebody actually explaining these possibilities and explaining the different scenarios. And so, the conversation went good. We still keep in touch. And, that's what I do. I like to educate people and I like to explain things that other people don't have access to. And I think it's really good, especially for your listeners, because you guys out there, you're just getting little bits and pieces of this and you're trying to put it all together. So being able to fill in some of those gaps, it's going to make you guys better investigators. I mean, your fans and, like my fiance, Amber, she hasn't investigated crime scenes before. And you guys all come up with some just amazing ideas, things that should be looked at that weren't. So it's, it's unfortunate that you can't just put these cases out to the public. And I think it'll go that direction at some point. I think investigations, more information will be released to the public because people online have more time, more resources, and you can kind of filter some of the crap out that happens during investigations and, put investigators down the right path. I mean, think about how many crimes have been solved just by people online or putting information out to the public.
I am so happy you said that. A lot of times it might be referred to as like armchair detectives or sleuthing. But if you look at on like Netflix, for example, the Gabby Petito case, and I don't need to rattle off all of them and we don't need to go way into the weeds on this. The internet now is so accessible and it's so vast. And there are things that you can dig up and that you can find and that you have at your fingertips. I've said for a long time, very rarely does the internet get stumped on cases in the long term. People will look into it a lot longer than, a police department can or an attorney can, and they continue to chip away at it. And usually it seems like whenever there's a Netflix documentary that comes out on a cold case, it reinvigorates it,
right?
Like on a massive scale.
Yeah. And although there's some things that come up that could potentially harm an investigation, like if, say, for example, if somebody threw out just some crazy theory and police had to go track that down and, investigate it, that could potentially hurt a case. But, for the most part, I think everything that the public comes up with is beneficial for cases. I mean, the only downside to that is that, it is public and, could it influence like copycats? Maybe, but, people are going to do what they're going to do anyways.
Yeah, people are insane, whether or not they're looking into it or not.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, people are absolutely crazy. And that's great perspective. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm going to get this back to full screen right here, Jeffrey, in about 5 to 10 seconds. We are going to start to hear Dylan explain to the cop what she had saw and heard. So I will be quiet and we're going to let this play.
Yeah.
they tell you anything? They were dressed out like we were in the main room.
This is one of the.
Pretty much they were in the main room. I kept dancing and laughing. Kaylee went upstairs and she screamed because someone's in the room. She ran downstairs and I kept calling her name and she wouldn't answer. And I saw the guy. I actually locked the door and I ran downstairs. We don't know what's going on.
Can you come here with me, please? Break Fire 3170. Could you guys grab some blankets for all these people out here?
Oh, okay.
Jeffrey, real quick, I got to sit on my hands. I always do that. I'm like, I'm going to let this play. And then something pops into my head from the crime scenes that you've been on. Is it unusual that all of these people are not separated right now?
A little, but considering that the police are going into something that they have no idea what the hell happened up there. And these people are obviously distraught. Typically you would take everybody, whether it's family, friends, and separate them. But they're also trying to figure out what the heck is even going on too. So at some point, yes, you want to separate everybody, get individual statements, make sure that, one person isn't influencing another person. But, initially it's kind of controlling that scene, controlling that environment. And you still want to treat people like humans initially. You don't want to just, some kid that's crying, you don't want to just throw them in the back of a police car and separate them from everybody. But, so it could go either way. I mean, Does it hurt their investigation, keep letting them all stay together? Yes, it does, because then it allows people to think that maybe they're sharing information, maybe they're generating a story. And if they were involved, yes, that's exactly what they're doing. So that's why you separate them immediately and try to get statements, even if, it could be considered insensitive or it could, potentially cause emotional harm to them. That's still how you investigate a scene. You have to investigate this crime, and whatever you need to do to, get reliable information, you have to do it as an officer. And so, yeah, could they have been separated? Yes.
Okay. All right.
Nope. Just come over here with me, please. Just give me 1 second, please. I'm going to get your name and information. Just 1 second. We'll get you a blanket and stuff, all right? Thanks, guys. Yeah, that'd be good for now, and then maybe the big white blankets whenever you move on. Probably just hang on to this whenever. Does that name on the sweater? No, yes, it does. Okay. We would like a blanket right now. It's temporary. Anybody like one for your feet to stand on?
Where do you want to pause it for a second?
Thanks, man.
What was that?
I was just telling you to pause it for a sec. So the other thing you got to think about too is all these people's clothing. So another reason you separate people and try to isolate them is their clothing. I mean, is anybody looking at their clothing? I mean, this was a crime scene where a knife was involved. There's blood in several rooms. Is anybody looking at their shoes? Is anybody looking at their socks, their shorts? Because if you have certain type of blood stains on you, that would indicate that you are in the presence of that crime scene. Like we were talking about blood spatter, the knife sheath, the type of blood that kind of rained down on the knife sheath.
Right.
That's that. And that shows with, certainty that knife sheath was in the presence of that violent act. So it was in the area when that happened. If, for example, if I saw cast off blood stains on the back of one of their shirts, or if I saw impact spatter on their shorts or their shoes, that would be very solid evidence that they were in the proximity of that stabbing event or that assault event. So that's another thing you have to consider, and why you want to be very cautious letting people interact with each other, because you're potentially missing out on critical blood evidence too, or even DNA evidence.
Right. And it's, most people know this, but this is also 8 to 10 hours later. It is interesting. Dylan doesn't have shoes on. She's the only one that doesn't have shoes on. And a lot of people have talked about, even the defense expert, not to go down this rabbit hole, but they talked about this process of a cleanup, and we see latent print outside of her door. And so with her not having shoes on, knowing that this happened at, right around 4 a.m. and she's on her phone and all that history, her just walking outside with no shoes, does that surprise you at all?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I mean, it would definitely, I mean, like you said, I mean, it's definitely something officers should look into. Like one of their first questions should be is, where's your shoes? And try to track them down, because like I said, if they have certain blood stains on them or certain evidence on them, it would indicate that they're in the presence of that act when it occurred, or it can be. But, considering too that the flip side of that, if she was asleep until this happened and just all of a sudden
ran downstairs.
Right. And, once you start realizing that, there's something really bad that's going on, is your first reaction going to be to put your shoes on? Probably not.
Right.
So that's, I remember, a time that there was something that happened down the street from my house. There was like a lot of police activity, and I remember walking outside with no shoes on. And so I can see both sides of it.
Okay. All right. So I backed up a little bit. Now I'm going to do my best here, Jeffrey. I didn't plan on showing you this because, to be honest, it's hard to catch, but I'm going to slow this down. People in the chat, if you've been in this, if you've been on this stream before, you might know what I'm going to try to attempt to catch on Dylan's arm here. I have a question about this. Okay. So I'm going to turn that robot voice off for a second, and I'm going to put frame by frame. Maybe I can actually go a little bit quicker. Okay. So I want you to look at Dylan's left arm.
Okay.
Right there. Do you see that? There's writing on it. And it says people have made that out to be what looks to say Gideon. My question to you is this. I've done research on this, okay? This is pure speculation. I've done research on what people sometimes call mass casualty events, right? And triage. I think they're saying like there's 3 triage areas where there's like deceased, wounded, need to be checked out. And is there ever a time where somebody would write their name or would use a Sharpie on them to clear them in a chaotic scene, or no?
Not a living person that's up walking and talking. Usually whenever, I also went to school for an EMT, so I was certified as an EMT for a while. So I kind of know how that stuff works too.
Okay.
So usually in the mass casualty incidents or like major trauma situations, so picture like a traffic accident. If you have, somebody that's on the ground, unconscious, not breathing, obviously dead, you're going to put a tag on them and say they're deceased. If you have somebody that might have, just respiratory distress, or they're, having anxiety from the accident, then they're okay. You can clear them. You can send them to a different triage area. But if you have somebody that actively needs CPR, they're going to get a different level of triage. So it's a way to kind of filter out who's deceased, who's injured, who needs medical care, who needs transport to the hospital. But somebody like, like these young people that are up walking and talking and, obviously not injured, they're not going to need something like that. So I can't see a scenario where a paramedic or an officer especially would write a name on somebody's arm. I don't see that as happening.
Not even if there is an officer or a detective Gideon that's working this case. And it looks to say, there's better images of this that say Gideon. It's spelled the same way. It's weird. So I just wanted to see if you knew anything. We don't got to speculate too much on it. I was just curious.
I've never seen anything like that, and I don't see why an officer especially would do something like that.
And Gideon's a character in the Vampire Diaries too, which, just to take this to a whole nother level of oddness, they were watching that night. So
okay,
that's weird, right? I mean, that's weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
It is interesting for sure. I don't know what it means, but
they never asked her about it, or you never saw anything in the records that would indicate why that was there, or?
I have not. Maybe somebody in the chat did. I'll keep an eye out on it, but I don't think that they did. But I'll let that play, and if I see something where somebody explains it, I'll pull it up on screen.
Thanks, man. Yeah, thanks. If that animal shows up, that'd be great too. Grab some blankets.
So Kaylee is his ex-girlfriend.
Just grab all your guys' info. They're warmer. Okay. I know she was barefoot, so I was hoping to get something for her, but thank you very much. Thanks, boss. Okay, what's your last name?
Okay, here we go. Initial statements.
And your first name? And your middle name? What's a good phone number to reach you? Okay, and is this your address?
Yes.
What's that address?
1122 King Road.
Is your driver's license right?
Yes.
Okay. How much have you seen in that?
No, I don't really know. I just saw my friend when I called because we were so scared. We're like, can you please come help us? And that's all I saw. He told us not to go in. That man right there. That helped show you around.
They did go in there.
Yeah, and that's when he told us he needed to call the cops.
Okay. When... Do you mind just waiting over there for me, please? Okay. When... Now, I overheard you talking about last night.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, the more we know right now, the better. We can start this process.
Yeah.
Somebody will probably be revisiting this interview with you very soon. Again, okay? So just, you're probably going to have to retell the story quite a bit.
That's fine.
All right. What do you remember seeing? What started?
I remember I was in my room and I was trying to go to bed and I heard Kaylee, who ex-girlfriend, who also has a dog in her room.
Real fast. Which one is your room?
Kaylee.
Which one is your room?
Oh,
what room are you in?
It's weird that that's redacted.
Yeah.
But because you haven't heard this, I feel like this is important for what the slides are lined up for next. And then we'll start kind of rolling through them.
You were in that room?
My room, not Xander's room. My room.
And your room is this one right here?
Next to the stairs. That one is Xander's room.
Second floor room.
Second floor.
Okay.
All I heard was I heard go upstairs. Like, okay, I'm gonna go to sleep now because she's going upstairs.
And you heard who go upstairs?
Kaylee and the dog Murphy.
And upstairs to the very top?
Yeah, that's where her room is.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden I heard her walking up. I heard her scream, and she ran downstairs because she saw someone. That's what I'm pretty sure she said. Someone's here, and she screamed and just ran downstairs. And I called for her name, but I jumped up and locked my door because I was so scared. And then I heard someone in the bathroom, and I heard her crying, and I heard some guy say that you're gonna be okay, I'm gonna help you. And I kept calling her name, but she wasn't answering. And then I opened the door for a second, and I saw this guy, and he was not insanely tall, but he was wearing all black and like this mask that was just covering his forehead and his mouth. And I locked the door and I called, and I didn't know what to do.
This was at 4
a.m. Yes. Okay. And so then I just ran down to
you left here?
Yeah, I left my room down to she's that one with the white blinds at the very bottom. Okay. I ran down there and we talked, and we just locked the door. We didn't think anything of it. We're like, nothing happens in Moscow, so we just like tried to go to bed. And then we woke up, and it was weird because none of our roommates were up, and we called all of them. They were not waking up, and so me and like, this is weird. So I called and to come over, and then that's when all this happened.
Who all lives here with you?
Me. That blonde one right there.
There's Santa.
Santa is the girl in there.
is the girl that
Yes.
this one?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you spell her name?
Xana.
Do you know if she has a middle name?
Alexis, I think.
Do you know what her last name is?
Kernodal. K. I don't know how to spell it really. K. You know? RNODL.
K-A-E-R.
K-E-R.
K-E-R.
N-O.
N-O.
L-E.
D-L-E. Okay.
X-A-N-A.
X-A-N-A. Okay.
Ethan, who's in there, he doesn't actually live here, but he's here like almost all the time.
There's a male that lives here, and
He doesn't actually live here. He's in the room with Xana, I believe.
he's in there right now.
But he doesn't live here, but he's here a lot.
So now, Jeffrey, did you see in the background they're putting Jack Decor, who's Kaylee's ex, into this police car?
Yeah,
Did you
I see that.
Okay, so any reason why they would only put him back there?
That's a good question. Unless they thought that maybe they thought his demeanor was different than everybody else's. But I mean, really, everybody should be separated at this point.
Right.
And the group of people shouldn't be that close to Dylan to where they could even hear her giving that statement, because that definitely influences, what their thoughts are or their feelings about it. But why they would separate just him, possibly just demeanor related, but also because he's the only male, and typically males get singled out in this type of thing, more so than females, even though, like I was mentioning, you got to keep all possibilities open. I mean, any one of these people could have been involved, but, they chose to single out just the male only, which is kind of interesting.
So we heard we heard everything that you would need to hear, right? You heard her initial statement. She said that Kaylee was going to go upstairs and go to bed. She was with her dog Murphy. In a different statement, when she's re-explaining it in an actual interrogation room, she says Kaylee and Murphy were dancing in the living room. Actually, she says that in the beginning when they first walk up, but she says Kaylee and Murphy were dancing in the living room, which is Kaylee's dog. Yeah. Then you heard her explain. She says, okay, I'm going to go to bed now. She goes upstairs. Then she screams and yells, there's someone here, and runs down the stairs. Dylan hops up, locks her door. Dylan hears somebody crying. Then Dylan runs downstairs and says, nothing like that ever happens here in Moscow. We're just going to try to go back to sleep. And then somehow it turns into an unconscious person. They go in, they see the 4 people actually unalived, and they were all killed in their sleep. But even the first person they talked to says she was sprinting down the stairs saying someone's here. How does that work?
Well, it sounds like, after learning more about this case and where people were at and how they were killed, that wasn't Kaylee that she was referring to. It was probably Xana coming down the stairs at a later time, and that's when she locked the door and realized that there was something going on. So that's my belief, just based on the evidence and the timelines and knowing a little more about the case. But yes, listening to that, had I not known the background of the case, I would think, oh, that's really weird, because that doesn't fit into the timeline, doesn't fit into the fact that, the 2 girls upstairs were killed first before the other two people. So, I can see how that can definitely influence your decision a little bit if you don't know the entire background of the case, for sure.
And so we're going to be getting into the state's theory, but would you agree that the unconscious person with 4 people found murdered in 2 different rooms on 2 different levels, and they saw a guy in a mask, they heard crying, they heard someone yell, someone's here, and they called for an unconscious person? That's got to be the understatement of the century.
Yeah, I can't really explain that, other than I read through some of the court transcripts, and Amber actually pointed this out, that, in the transcripts, it sounds like the girls never went in the room. So I don't think Dylan ever went in and actually saw her friends had been murdered.
Okay.
Didn't realize it was
So I think the people that went in just realized that there was something wrong and didn't share with the rest of the group. Like there's stab wounds and there's blood everywhere. It doesn't sound like that conversation was made. It was just, you guys don't want to see this. And so I can see how the 911 caller and even some of the people that got on the phone with the dispatchers might not really know the the severity of what had happened, because like they'd said, it sounded like nothing ever happens like that in that area. So my first reaction to not calling the police, I mean, to me that just sounds crazy. You see a
Yeah.
masked intruder and you don't call the police, and that still just blows me away, whether nothing ever happens there or not.
Right.
I can't imagine. I would love to talk to them and say, have you ever seen a masked person in your house before? And what, because I mean, if you ask the average person, what would you do if you saw somebody in a mask inside your home in the middle of the night and the back door is open? You would call the police immediately, but that didn't happen. And so I can see how that would be reason for concern. And that's why all these different, side theories come up is like, it doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense to a logical person, but we don't know her state of mind at the time. I haven't heard anything about, I mean, these are college kids, drugs and alcohol happen.
Right.
So, what was her demeanor at the time that she saw this person? And, but then, if you're saying that part of your demeanor doesn't make sense, then how can you say that they provided an accurate statement about what they saw? I mean, the suspect, bushy eyebrows and a mask.
Right.
How can you say that that's correct, but then other things that they say are not correct? It definitely is concerning, for sure.
Yeah, and she's obviously awake all night on her phone. We have the phone activity. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to transition into, so Jeffrey, like I said in the beginning and backstage Hive, Jeffrey said, challenge me, kind of stretch his brain a little bit. So what I have here is I have a multitude of slides where I'm going to go through a series of slides here, Jeffrey, and I'm just going to read them out, and then we're going to get to some photos. And I want you to just, for the next few slides, let's just focus on these documents, these photos, forget any narrative, and let's just look at this. Again, now that you're aware of the case and what happened, let's look at this and let's read this through kind of a different lens. All right. So on July 6th, this comes from an ISP document. This is the state's theory, and I'm going to go ahead and read this out. Now, on November, so this is a little bit longer, but I'm just going to go ahead and read this. I'm going to put this up on the screen here for everybody to see. Okay. Let me make it a little bit bigger. So, and Jeffrey, I'm going to move us down here to the bottom because we don't really need to see Bethany's room. So let me just get us out of the way, or let's move us. We'll kind of do this. We'll go on opposite sides of the screen here for a second.
That works.
All right. Okay. So this is from July 26, 2023. And this is where they're going to, and who did this? This is Sergeant Darren Gilbertson conducted time runs through the residence. Okay. So based upon the processing of the crime scene and the evidence collected, investigators believed Kohberger drove to the area and parked behind the back of the residence. There is a paved parking area directly to the south that overlooks the back of the residence. Kohberger most likely entered the residence through a sliding glass door located on the second level and rear of the residence, and then proceeded as follows. After entering through the sliding glass door, Kohberger walked through the kitchen area to a set of stairs that led up to the third floor. Kohberger then went up the stairs to the third floor. At the top of the stairs and directly to the left side is a door which was Goncalves' bedroom, and to the right is a short hallway that ended into a bathroom and another door to Mogan's bedroom. Most likely, Kohberger checked Goncalves' bedroom, saw it was empty, and then moved into Mogan's bedroom, where we believe both Goncalves and Mogan were asleep in Mogan's bed. Kohberger murdered both of them in the bed. Kohberger most likely went back down the stairs, walked through the second floor living room, and then down the hallway, which ended at Kernodle's bedroom. Based on the evidence, Kernodle was initially attacked just inside the bedroom near the entrance. Kernodle fought the suspect in the bedroom area and was ultimately killed on the floor of the bedroom next to the bed. Chapin, who we believe was asleep, was murdered in the bed. Kohberger left the bedroom area, walked back down the hallway, passed through the living room kitchen, and exited through the sliding glass door, leaving the door partly open. Koberger then walked back to his vehicle and drove away from the area. I conducted 2 timed runs, the first being as quick as possible, and the second a slower, deliberate timed run. During the first trial run, I began at the rear of the residence and came through the sliding glass door. I then quickly moved through the kitchen and up the stairs. I looked into the bedroom to the left and then moved down the hallway into Mogan's room. I simulated the number of strikes that were inflicted upon Mogan and Goncalves. Detective Talbot counted and kept track in an attempt to recreate the movements and motions believed to have occurred based on the evidence collected and autopsy reports. I moved out of the bedroom, down the stairs, through the living room, down the hallway, and into Kernodle's room, again with the assistance of Detective Talbot. I simulated the number of strikes that were inflicted upon Kernodle and Chapin. I then exited down the hallway, through the living room, through the kitchen, and out the sliding glass door. Corporal Payne reported a time of approximately 1 minute and 30 seconds on the quick as possible timed run. And on the slower run, it took him 2 minutes and 33 seconds. So they don't account for what Dylan had said, being that Kaylee and Murphy were down in the living room, and they don't talk about the scream that someone's here. They don't talk about the guy where she says she heard crying in the bathroom and it's okay, I'm here to help you. If Koberger's doing this in a minute and a half, how does Dylan have any time to hear any of that? Right?
Yeah, and what they're doing is good. I mean, they're testing their theories, seeing how fast it would take for somebody to go through the residence. But that's the problem with some of the reconstructions and testing. If you get it wrong, then it's going to open up more, doubt in the case versus help your case. Because do I believe that somebody could go through that house and, inflict 150 stab wounds on somebody in 2 minutes? No, I mean, that's just way too fast. I just don't see that as happening. Plus you have to, account for all the different blood stains in different areas, all the items of evidence in different areas. So that all has to be taken into consideration in your reconstruction. I mean, a basic, simple walkthrough or driving from one location to another, that's great, but it doesn't take into account every single event or every single piece of evidence that you have. And that's what you have to do. When you're doing a true reconstruction of a crime scene, you have to take into consideration everything. So like every single blood stain, every single thing that's tipped over, every single, movement, every single stab wound, all those have to be taken into consideration. The dog, where was the dog at during all this? And how did it end up, locked up? Or, those are all things that have to be taken into consideration during your reconstruction.
I would also be curious too, before they did the reconstruction, did they familiarize themselves with the house? They say, and I sent you that interview of the 2 detectives talking with the lady from CNN, and they say he's never been to the house. He has no connection to them. I'd be curious, did these officers already know the layout of the house and have been inside? It doesn't sound like Koberger ever had been.
And that's a form of bias. So if you know the layout of the residence, you're obviously going to move through it much faster than if you didn't. Do we know for certain that he's never been in that house, though?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that. Well, they have it. If he has, nobody knows, right? They can put him within 300 feet of it, and we all know how cell phone towers just give you approximation, right? We don't know. He is a student right across the state lines where there's other WSU students that may hang out and go to these houses. I'm not sure, but really, first time in the house, 5 cars in the driveway. He's got autism, visual snow, dexterity issues, and he's only got 1 knife in a minute and a half. To your point, it's ludicrous. That's crazy.
That's a little far-fetched, I would believe, to account for everything that happened. Now, when you start talking about like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or longer, then it becomes much more possible and a realistic possibility that one person could do it. But if you're talking like 2 minutes, I just don't see that as being possible.
Right.
Considering everything that has been reported.
Yep. And also, the evidence, as we discussed last time on the stream, Jeffrey, there's blood in the switchback stairwell. That's got Maddie. There's blood down on the pong table. That's Kaylee. there's a swipe stain of Ethan, and then there's a 90-10 mixture of Maddie and Kaylee as well. I believe last time you called it cast off. That's on the first to second floor stairwell. So how does that work into the theory?
You have to be able to explain all of that in your reconstruction. So did he come downstairs multiple times, go back upstairs multiple times? That all has to be taken into consideration. And then obviously that's adding more time to the theory. But
right.
You know, if there's evidence there, you have to try to explain it. And if you can't explain it, then that's reasonable doubt. And so, I mean, we can talk about why this case was pled out versus why it went to trial. I have some ideas, but you know, every single thing that you can't explain at a scene is creating doubt. And for a jury member that has, you know, their own independent thoughts and ideas, that opens them up to where, you know, they might be like, well, hey, you know, I haven't been, you know, given enough evidence or enough information to make me truly believe that this person should be given the death penalty or you know, be in prison for the rest of their life. So, you know, that's something they consider when they're taking cases to court, especially high profile cases that everybody's looking at.
Exactly. And so to maybe people who don't know about the second floor in the living room and Jeffrey as a refresher, right? So we obviously know that the state's narrative is this was contained to the rooms. They were killed in their sleep. I just read the ISP report when they did their 2 trial runs. One took 1.5 minutes, and then the slower one took 2.5 minutes. But we do have Kaylee's blood on the ping pong table. We have, like I said, a swipe mark from Ethan. We have major Kaylee, minor Maddie. That's above the stairs. Same thing on the sidewall. Then we have what's listed as A and C, but we also have an unknown male B on this handrail as well. So can you also explain, when you're looking at this, for people that maybe missed last stream, your initial theory was that this is cast off?
Well, let's go through each stain.
Okay.
So this is kind of, so we'll pretend kind of like we're in the courtroom. You could be the attorney, the prosecuting or defense attorney. So if you go back to that previous slide where it shows where everything's at.
Yep.
Good. So the last time that we talked, I didn't have all of this information. I didn't know whose blood was there. I just went based strictly off of the characteristics of the stains, and we talked about what are the possibilities. But now that we know whose blood it is, or whose DNA it is, then it really narrows down our possibilities. So let's just start with Kaylee's blood on that table.
Okay.
So Kaylee and Maddie were killed in that bed. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind, based on the blood evidence, the stain patterns that are around the bed and the headboard, I don't have any doubts that they were both killed in that bed. So then you have to figure out how her blood got down to that table. Was it still on the suspect's body? You know, the question is, did she come downstairs like Dylan said in her statement? I don't believe so, but you can't 100% rule that out. So, you know, was she injured and ran downstairs and coughed up blood on the table, or did she touch the table? Possible. But then you got to look at the type of blood stain that it is. So if you look closely at that table, that's a rather dilute blood stain. So if you look at the surface of the table, so that there's like strands coming off of it. So that could be blood that was coughed up or spit up.
What direction would that have come from, do you think?
From right to left.
So from here to here. Okay.
So there's like a trailing off or a tail that would point in the direction of travel or surface contact. There's only a few ways that blood stain could be made. Could it be made by contact and then it's diluted by some liquid, like one of the cups tipping over and diluting it? Possibly. Could it have been coughed up? Possibly. So like if somebody's like punched in the mouth, or they have a facial injury or a bloody nose, you know, you can cough up blood and it will appear somewhat dilute. Is that an impact stain, like from an assault? No. Is it a blood stain that fell off of somebody's bloody hand dripping onto the table? No, because it doesn't have the characteristics of that type of stain. So then it kind of narrows down the possibility. How could those girls be killed in their bed, yet a dilute or blood stain end up on the table after the fact? Could the suspect have bit them and spit it up themselves? That's possible. Could it have been on a weapon that was maybe cleaned a little bit or wiped up, and then it gets projected, like cast off onto the table? Maybe. Or could it have been like more of a whole blood sample that some kind of fluid came in contact with, whether it's, the cup tipping over or some other fluid? Maybe, but there's not a lot of possibilities. So it really makes you think about what actually transpired and what are the possibilities. Could she have come down at some point and had an injury and coughed up onto the table? I mean, that's possible, but not likely, considering that they were both, appeared to be, attacked in their position where they died. That's my opinion based on the blood spatter patterns in the room. So
Can I run one by you?
Please.
Okay. So going off of, and I know there's going to be people in the chat that are like, you're going to take Dylan's word. She did, her first statement was that she heard Kaylee run down the stairs. Is it possible, because I believe you had mentioned that, was she, and this is graphic, so I apologize, but just explaining it in as professional of a way as I can. If she was assaulted where she's punched in her face and then taken back upstairs, if Dylan's statement is accurate that she heard Kaylee yell, "Someone's here," and ran downstairs, could somebody have chased her down and essentially punched or knocked her out and led to what we're seeing in the living room with all of these stains here, where then she was almost taken or carried back up? Is that possible in your head?
Is it possible? Yes, it is actually. And considering that there's multiple areas that have a mixture of Kaylee and Maddie's blood there. But then you got to think about timing, right? Was Maddie murdered, and then Kaylee was assaulted and then taken back up there and murdered? Because that would be the only way that you would get that mixture of Kaylee and Maddie's blood. However,
my theory, I don't want to cut you off.
If they were both murdered up there in the bed, and then something happens coming downstairs, and while their DNA or blood is still on the murder weapon, or enough volume is on the suspect, and that suspect is then fighting with another person, Zaina, in the vicinity of that stairwell and the table, could that altercation then create cast-off stains and diluted stains that get projected off a knife or a weapon or spit up or coughed up to where it ends up on these surfaces? That's another possibility.
Okay. And I appreciate that insight. My working theory on what Dylan said is, if Kaylee and Murphy were dancing down in the living room, like she said, I'm going to go upstairs with the dog. My thought is, did Kaylee go into her own room with her dog and start getting ready for bed, but hear something in Maddie's room? She then walks and sees what's happening and yells, "Someone's here," runs down the stairs. The perpetrator chases her, hence why we have the blood in that living room area and the cups only knocked off on that one side. She's then carried or picked up and put back into Maddie's room, because that's where the initial attack was occurring. Hence why Maddie's under the covers and Kaylee's on top of the covers. And that's my working theory.
It's possible. And I don't think there is any scene evidence or even circumstantial evidence that could 100% rule that out. And those are things that, when I have to testify, I really got to think about it, because is that possible considering the evidence that we're seeing? And the answer would have to be yes. It is definitely possible. Would I expect to see some different bloodstains if that happens? So let's say, for example, Maddie was up in the top room. She was murdered. And like you said, if Kaylee maybe heard something or saw something and then kind of went to her aid and then ends up, fighting with this suspect. I mean, some of my questions would be why didn't the other people in the home, other than Dylan, hear this? But I mean, I guess her room is in close proximity to where, where this altercation could have occurred. But then if she's injured to the extent to where she's coughing up blood and there's blood being cast off onto walls, I would anticipate a different set of blood stains going back upstairs. So like if she's actively bleeding from the nose or mouth, or even if somebody is carrying
Like these?
some, and is that going up to the 3rd floor?
Yep.
That isn't that the stairwell?
That's the switchback stairwell. That's so that's going 2nd to 3rd floor. So Kaylee's room would be to the left, Maddie's would be, or I'm sorry, this is the reverse view, but this is the 2nd floor, 3rd floor, and there's swipe stains. There's this is Maddie's blood.
Yeah,
so again, if
transfer.
So if Kaylee did walk in to Maddie's room after hearing something and the perp chased her, that's why I believe it's only Maddie's blood here, because the dude put his hand, or whoever did this put their hand as he's chasing Kaylee down the stairs.
Yeah, and I don't have anything that would 100% dispute that. I mean, I would anticipate there being more like whole blood if she was actively bleeding, like going down the stairs and then back up the stairs. Like I would expect there to be like drip stains on the stairs. If you are injured, you're naturally going to like hold your hand to your face or try to prevent it. But if you're actively fighting with somebody, you're not going to do that. But the DNA or the stains M, L, and K, whose DNA are those?
So I believe that this is Maddie's.
Okay.
And 41 is obviously the most prominent one that you see. Oh, sorry, you're covering it right now. So this is the switchback stairs. And really what that leads me to is this right here. And I'm just going to leave this full screen so I can read this. So we have 7 different transfer stains on the stairs going from the 3rd down to the 1st floor. There are 7 different transfer stains. There are no drip stains, like you just pointed out, Jeffrey, from the 3rd to the 2nd floor. And there's a heavy blood in the living room and the lower staircase. How does the perp have that much blood and not leave a single drip between the rooms?
Like blood dripping off of them?
Yeah.
It depends on the type of clothing they're wearing. I mean, if they're wearing a type of clothing where the blood's going to saturate into the surface, then it's not going to pull up and drip off. If you're wearing like a raincoat, you can have blood on your clothing and it just pulls up and drips off. So clothing, the volume of blood, and there is absolutely no way that somebody would inflict the injuries that they did on Maddie and Kaylee up in that room and not have blood on their clothing. It is, or their body or their hair or they're on the back of them. Okay. So it's just impossible. I mean, you don't inflict those type of injuries on somebody and not have blood, in certain areas. Like I've got videos, I was helping out I've done demonstrations for colleges and stuff, and you see the college students making impact spatter stains and cast off, and they're just, everybody around them has blood stains on them. The students are covered in blood. So it would be impossible to inflict those type of injuries with a knife, especially, and not have blood all over you. So that's how blood can be transferred to different surfaces. But the stuff on the 2nd level by the folding table, it's kind of confusing because it does have a lot of mixtures. They're different stain types that you wouldn't necessarily expect in that type of incident, unless, like I was saying, somebody is either coughing up blood or spitting up blood. That can give you that diluted effect. Or if like a cup gets tipped over onto the table, or maybe there was fluid already on the table from the game the night before. But the other thing you have to take into consideration too is, these are college kids. They do what college kids do. And is that blood 100% from that incident? I mean, you likely believe so because, there's a stabbing and you don't suspect that people would just leave blood on a table, but you don't 100% for certain know that. So that's another thing we have to take into consideration is timing. And there wouldn't be necessarily a way to say for certain that blood on that table that you identified as Kaylee's was created that night. So those are all things you have to think about.
So in addition to what you had stated about it's impossible for somebody to not have blood on them if they were doing the killing, what about footsteps? What about footprints? How is there none of that either? Given Ethan and Xana's room too.
That one's, so I can see how in Maddie and Kaylee's room that the suspect would not have blood on their feet.
because maybe their feet are under the bed, or because I've thought that too. But Ethan and Xana's way different situation.
Right. So that the person that was upstairs that killed those two girls, they were either on top of them doing that, or they were like off to the side, leaning over the bed doing that. So I mean, I'd have to look closer at the blood stains, and just some of the evidence is the same. But I mean, those are the two different possibilities, right? They were either on the bed up there with them, or they were off to the side of the bed inflicting those injuries. Those are your two possible scenarios. So in both of those scenarios, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to get blood transferred to the bottom of your shoe. So I can see why there would not be any bloody footwear impressions either upstairs or on that stairwell leading down to the second floor. Now, when you go into Xana and Ethan's room, you see blood all over the floor. So you would anticipate that the suspect at some point is stepping in that blood. If they stayed around while that person was creating those blood stains on the ground. So maybe they, created the stab wounds and took off and essentially left them for dead. And then they're still moving around on the ground. That's possible too, right? To where they didn't get the opportunity to step in the blood. And that's what you kind of got to think about. But then there's also other possibilities. Did this person prepare and cover their clothing or cover their body in a way to where they're not going to get blood stains? So there's a lot of different possibilities, but I can't, just looking at the evidence that I have access to and looking at those blood stains, I can't say for certain that she didn't come downstairs and get in some kind of altercation and then end up back upstairs on the bed. So that's an interesting thought.
Because so if that is logical to think through, right? So there's 3 different DNA profiles. You have Maddie on the stairs, which is what I have on screen right now. On the pong table, you got Kaylee. Right. And then on the half wall on the first floor stairs, last time you said cast off, that's 90 Kaylee, 10 Maddie. Would that still, you're saying that could make sense, but it's highly unlikely.
Right.
Okay.
Well, if there's a mixture like that, if somebody attacked Maddie upstairs and they have blood on their weapon, and then they are attacking Kaylee in that same area and creating cast-off stains that then have a DNA mixture of Maddie and Kaylee on the wall, and then she runs back upstairs and they finish assaulting her. That is one possibility. More likely, though, they were both killed upstairs. There is a mixture of DNA on that weapon, and then when that suspect is in an altercation with another person, that's when the cast-off is created and it has a DNA mixture. So that's another possibility. So those are 2 different scenarios that could give you that same DNA mixture with a cast-off pattern.
Okay. And now, with that being said, if we were in court, because this is how I want to finish this segment of the stream here, is if we were in court and I was to call Dylan as a witness to the stand, and I can really just kind of replay this.
You were in that room?
My room, not Xana's room. My room.
And your room is this one?
All I heard was I heard go upstairs. Like, okay, I'm gonna go to sleep now because she's going upstairs.
And you heard who go upstairs?
Kaylee and the dog Murphy.
And upstairs to the very top?
Yeah, that's where her room is.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden I heard her walking up. I heard her scream, and she ran downstairs because she saw someone. That's what I'm pretty sure she said. Someone's here, and she.
So if we were in court and I play that and I show that evidence that I just kind of laid out, does that, in your opinion, from being an expert that's testified with the jury, how do you think that would land? Does that still hold up then? That, somebody.
I would think the attorney would have to ask some more clarifying questions. Like, are you sure it was Kaylee that you heard? What was the timeline? How long after she went upstairs with her dog did you hear her say that? And then how long after did you lock your door?
Okay.
So, I mean, there would have to be some obviously clarifying questions, but, obviously that's a form of evidence, right? I mean, it's, direct witness testimony. I mean, it's eyewitness testimony that you're hearing. But then you have to think about witness testimony under stressful situations. It's not always accurate. And, that's one of the things that I've taught about is just how inaccurate direct witness testimony can be in a very stressful situation, either, like a victim of domestic violence or somebody that has seen something very traumatic. I mean, they can report the completely wrong race of a person in some scenarios. So that has to be taken into consideration too. What's her mental state, how much does she actually remember versus what the reality is. So those are things that would need to be clarified.
Yeah. And that's interesting too, because then, and I'm just spitballing here, but from a defense attorney, then you could probably say, okay, so if under these circumstances it's stressful, what's to give any credibility then to the guy in a black mask and the bushy eyebrows, seeming how you didn't call for 8 hours, right? And like it has a domino effect. So to your point of saying in the beginning, maybe you could explain why they didn't take this to trial. I think we're kind of starting to sum up maybe why they didn't.
Exactly. Yeah. And, if I were a defense attorney and I'm hearing all these things and all these different possibilities, I'd be like, well, if an expert is saying that these are all different possibilities, then why are we saying that my client is guilty? So those are things that, defense attorneys latch onto. They're like, well, if you can't say with 100% certainty what has happened, then why are we sending my person to prison, or why are we, putting them on death row? So that does explain a lot why cases, they plea out, just because they realize like there's a whole lot of stuff, circumstantial evidence that could really create reasonable doubt. Whereas if, we take this, admission of guilt, we at least get a conviction. Whereas all these other things, a jury could see it in a completely different way. And we're starting to see that in these conversations, how very easily, you can analyze information and come up with different theories. Like, do I have a way to 100% dispute that possibility that Kaylee came downstairs? No, I don't, because, she could have come downstairs, went back upstairs, somebody put her in bed, and then she could have been still killed in that same position, creating those same blood spatter patterns. And, she did have defensive wounds too, which indicates that at some point she was alert. Now, whether she was conscious and aware of what was going on, we don't know that. But we do know that she has defensive wounds. So that means that, and if anybody doesn't know what defensive wounds are, think about it as if somebody is attacking you, you're going to put your hands up. So either like this, blocking it, or like this. So you're going to have wounds on your forearms. You're going to have wounds on your hands, your fingers. Those are defensive wounds. Offensive wounds are more like punches, like your knuckles. If you're holding a knife and you are cutting somebody and that knife slips, those are going to be offensive wounds.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. In as brutal of an attack as this is a two-part question. Would you expect to see offensive wounds on somebody going at the speed that, in that report that I read when they did their trial runs?
Yeah, you would expect that the suspect, especially, in most knife yielding attacks, the suspect has some type of injury on them, whether it's bruises, cuts, scrapes, but then we also don't know what type of clothing was being worn. I mean, if the statement is accurate that the person was wearing a black mask and, black clothing, they're covered up. So they're probably wearing gloves too. So that would definitely prevent those offensive type wounds from occurring.
Now, the second part of that question is how many cases would you guess you've been an expert on for giving your expert testimony?
I haven't had an opportunity to testify a lot as an expert on blood pattern, just because those kind of cases don't come up a ton.
Okay.
But I've testified on quite a few cases. I've testified on blood pattern cases, and I have been qualified as an expert. And you do get asked some kind of unusual questions. And, sometimes you are asked to just give a direct opinion. Sometimes you're asked to just analyze evidence and allow the jury to interpret that. But usually if you get to the point where you're testifying as an expert, that you are giving opinions. So like a forensic pathologist, they can give opinions, how long did that person survive after these injuries? How much did they suffer? As a blood pattern analyst, I'm giving opinions based on the evidence that I see. What are the different scenarios? Like we were analyzing those blood stains and the different possibilities. That's the type of thing that I might have to testify to in court. And it's just, you have to entertain the different attorneys' opinion or theories, and you say, is this possible or not based on the evidence? And then the jury ultimately ends up making that decision.
Yeah.
So it is interesting. And you're really only allowed to answer questions that you're asked. So if the attorney that is asking you these questions doesn't know the right questions to ask, you're very limited in what you can do to help the case or potentially hurt the case. So I mean,
sorry.
Go ahead.
What would you ask if this was presented? If you were an attorney, let's say as a defense expert or a defense attorney, hypothetically, give me like your top 1 or 2 questions. What would you ask anybody about this, given the official narrative?
Oh my goodness.
Sorry to put you on the spot. I'm just curious.
Let me think about this. I have thought about this a lot. I mean, obviously I would want to know all the injuries. I would want to be able to examine more of the evidence, because I've been kind of just fed little pieces of evidence here and there, but I would want to see all of it laid out. And like this is perfect right here, because this then allows you to generate some theories. I would want to know, everybody's mental state. I would want to know their history going into this. And, that's when it gets really complicated, is the more you learn about people, the more it opens up, reasonable doubt. I mean, think about yourself. I mean, if somebody goes through your personal phone right now, they're going to know a lot about you. Whereas if you were murdered and, nobody looks into your background or history, it's just taken for face value. But then if you start looking into people's lives, their history, their social interactions, maybe their, recreational drug use or alcohol abuse, then it starts kind of opening up holes in that investigation. I'd have to really think about that, what I would ask as a defense attorney. I think I would just ask a lot of absolutes. Like, are you 100% certain that was Kaylee that you heard, screaming? Exactly what time was it that, you heard this? What exactly were you doing? What was your mental state during all this? These are questions I would ask of Dylan, like, what were you doing during that entire 8 hours when you were concerned that somebody was in your home? Have you ever seen somebody in your home before? How did you react to that? So I would have a lot of questions, just trying to narrow down like certainties. And that's the good thing about the evidence, the forensic evidence, especially, is, this is certain, that that's Kaylee's blood based on DNA, but then that also adds levels of uncertainty because you don't know how it got there. And you don't even know for sure that it came from that day. I mean, very easily. I mean, of course, the bloodstain type suggests that it was coughed up or spit up or diluted in some way, but you don't know for certain. And so you're trying to generate certainty with your analysis of the evidence, but sometimes you can't. And it's very it's bothersome as an analyst because you want the facts, information, you want to know absolutes, but sometimes you just open up more questions versus getting, and it's
so that's kind of the whole house layout. Now I'm going to go into specifically Ethan and Xana's room, Jeffrey. So thank you for explaining all of that. And Hive, I'm just going to take like a 10-second, reminder. If you have not hit the like button, please go ahead and do so. Hit subscribe. At the end of this stream, I'm going to have Jeffrey share where you guys can find his stuff. So make sure you hang out because we're going to do a Q&A, and Jeffrey will also be able to tell you where you guys can. He's got his action figures that he's talked about in the past. I know everybody was hyped about that, as well as his channel and his courses. So stay tuned for that. And
I'm really curious if your viewers like hearing this, like, because to me, it's just like kind of my normal routine. Like this is kind of what I do. I look at evidence. I talk about the facts. I talk about, what are the possibilities, but like, I know you and your viewers, you guys want to know what happened. You guys want absolutes. You want to know, exactly timelines, what statements were factual, what were not. And so I kind of wonder sometimes, am I creating more uncertainty or more confusion by analyzing some of these things, or does it really help you guys like put it together and like have a better or a deeper understanding of the possibilities?
I could say 100% without a doubt, you have absolutely in the, I guess, probably at 3.5, 4 hours that we spent together, even though you don't know the case, your expertise has absolutely helped people dive into, this case. We don't know the bloodstain patterns and how it could get there. So we might know the documents and we might know interviews better, but you know the blood and you know the crime scene better. So I can give you a quick glimpse into if people are enjoying this or not. Hive and Jeffrey, I don't know if you can see the chat.
Yeah,
Hive, okay, type a 1 in the chat if it's a yes to Jeffrey's question of this is absolutely helping us and is helpful. I'll type a 1 in there too right now, and I'm sure if you can see the chat, it will flood. I don't even know if it'll.
I know one of the things we're going to talk about at the end is my classes, but I have a bloodstain pattern analysis course. It's on my website. So anybody can take it. It doesn't have to just be cops or investigators. It's opened up to the public. I mean, there is a charge associated with it, but we have a coupon code for Birdie so you can get a discount. But when I'm talking,
I'm going to take it.
When I'm talking about the different bloodstain pattern types, so when you have blood that's on your finger and it's dripping off, that's a drip stain. It's going to look the same almost every time. There might be some little variation, but it's going to look the same. If you create like a drip stain, if you beat somebody with a baseball bat, you're going to get impact spatter, and it's going to look the same. Whether you beat them with a hammer, a bat, it's impact spatter. So it's a characteristic pattern that's associated with that force event. If you swing a bloody object and creates cast off on the ceiling, for the most part, it's going to look the same throughout different scenes. If you have blood that's like in someone's mouth and it's coughed up, it's going to look the same. So I go through like in my class, how to identify those patterns, how to describe them, how to analyze them, and then I show how they're created. So I think anybody that's interested in like true crime or some of these, like really violent cases, I would recommend, getting that kind of education that's not usually available to like the general public, just so you kind of have an understanding and see why I can say like this stain was created this way. So these are the different possibilities of how it was created. And these are the different possibilities, especially if it's a DNA mixture, of how it got there. So that's really critical for people to understand, like, just how these blood stains and how these patterns are created. And then if it's a mixture, how you can understand how it could be interpreted. And then you use all that in Reconstruction.
No, that's awesome, man. And like I said, I got all the slides, Hive, at the end with all the information on how to do that. And I think it's great. I'm going to use the discount code for sure and do it myself. Last question. I said we're going to move on to Ethan and Xana's room. Uncle Daddy had asked, have you ever seen a crime scene torn down, physically torn down before a trial? Before Koberger, I believe, even had did he even have his court date, Hive, yet? But why would they do that?
So usually you would not destroy a crime scene, because if I were the prosecutor and I were trying to show my jury that this person that's on trial is guilty, I would want them to see the layout. That home is not easy to understand. It took me a long time to understand where those stairs went, and looking at two-dimensional photographs does not do it justice. So usually they will keep it intact. That way the jury could do like a walkthrough, see the layout, see where he potentially parked. But on the flip side of that, this is a huge tragedy that happened to, a rather small community, a tight-knit community. It's on a college campus. So every time that you look at that thing, it's a reminder of what happened. You don't want people like flooding to the location just to kind of, I guess, enjoy, other people's tragedy, because that does happen.
Right.
But, should they have necessarily torn the place down? I mean, I think about like John Wayne Gacy's home. That got torn down and they rebuilt that home. Obviously, there are, tons of people murdered and buried in his basement. So I get it. But how long was it after this happened that they tore the place down?
I want to say, was it about a year, or was it 13 months almost? Because I don't know if Amber, your fiance, will get a kick out of this from a numerology standpoint. I believe it was like 13 months on the day. Which that's just interesting. I think that's how I remember it. But yeah, it's odd. I think they said it was going to be a memorial, but then there was something else about like hazardous chemicals in an email that people have seen. I just was curious if you've ever seen that. And I want to move on now to People have asked. Pavarotti was somebody who submitted some questions. So that last slide that you guys saw with the pong table and the switchback and the stairwell was kind of building off of the last stream that we had talked to Jeffrey with. This is one that has been highly requested as well, going back to the Amito Black, Jeffrey, that we talked about last time. Okay. So I'm going to put this full screen. All of the Amito Black hits were prints, whether those were shoe prints, toe prints, and fingerprints.
Okay.
L4 is a shoe print that's outside Dylan's door on the second floor. L3 is a foot and toe print inside Xana's room. L5 is a print on the sliding door handle in the kitchen. And L6, it's super faded. You guys should be able to see it. I zoomed in as far as I could where it was still not blurry. L6 is a print on the front of the rear slider. My question is this confirming, because it hit for Amito Black on L5 and L6, that those prints were in fact bloody?
Yes, if it's Amito Black, it should be blood that it's reacting with. The Amito Black reacts with the proteins in the blood, and so it we talked about. So a latent stain is one that you cannot see just with the naked eye. But if you add this enhancing chemical or material, thank you, it will make it visible. So that's the footwear and the fingerprints. So I would call that a possible footwear impression, because has anybody come out and been able to 100% identify that as a shoe? No. So you say it's a possible footwear impression, and that that suggests that it's an item of footwear, but then it leaves it open to where you're not narrowing yourself. Because what if somebody then comes up, like you sent me that lacrosse net?
What if Jeffrey? Sorry, you kind of cut out for like 5-10 seconds. Repeat that.
So you would want to say that is a possible footwear impression. You don't want to necessarily say that is 100% a shoe print, unless you have the shoe or the item that you could match up. Like you sent me a picture of that lacrosse net, and at a glance, I was like, wait a second, maybe that could be. But then when you look at it more, you realize that is a very uniform geometric pattern that is usually associated with footwear impressions, and so you could probably very quickly rule out that lacrosse net as being the item that created that impression. But yes, it would be blood, and that's what the Amito Black is doing. It's just making a stain that you can't see with the naked eye visible. That way you could document it.
Okay. And so with that being said, then, right, we have L5 and L6 right here zoomed in again as close as I could get it where it's not blurry. So hopefully you guys can see that on your end. These prints, they did not come from Brian Koberger, and any person that was involved in calling 911 were cleared from making this print as well. Does this mean that there was more than one perp, seeming how it's on the sliding door? Or if not, how does the state explain that, in your opinion?
Where is it at? Where's that one at?
So that is going to be on, let me pull this up full screen here. So that's going to be on this. It's on the back sliding door. If you can see my cursor, where Dylan said that she saw, or where they suspect Koberger entered and left. It's on that door, but it's not Koberger. And that's why I'd asked you if it hit with the Amito Black, that must mean there's blood on it. You just explained that. And if that's not from Koberger, and everybody that was in the house that was there when they called 911, what does that mean?
It means that I'd have some questions.
So that's a simple way to put it. Yeah.
You talk about what would a reasonable defense attorney latch onto, and it's things like that.
Okay.
You have a fingerprint that's at a very violent crime scene that is left in blood, and the investigators discovered it and enhanced it and collected it. And I mean, that's an identifiable print right there. There's enough ridge detail on there that you could match that up to someone. That's assuming that you have all their impressions. Like, is that a palm or a finger? That would have to be explored a little more. But maybe the person that created that, maybe their fingerprints or impressions weren't available, or that part of their finger was not fingerprinted to where they could match that up. That's a possibility too. I think I would, like you said, rule out every single person and make sure that you are 100% ruling them out. I mean, don't just do like a half-ass print job. You know, you're printing their palm, their fingers, you know, all the sides of their fingers, and you want to make sure is you spend a lot of time ruling out everybody that was in that home, and you know, obviously the person that got arrested for the crime, you know, you want to make sure 100% sure, you know, that is not them.
So this is my question now. At Hive, I hope you guys can kind of see the progression that I was taking Jeffrey through right there, right? Talking about the whole house. And Jeffrey, I hope that it's been easy for you to follow. I tried to have as many visuals as possible. So the whole house, right? And then we did the stairwells, the pong table, and now the specific prints that hit with the Mito Black that a lot of people have had questions on. I just laid out, you know, L3, L4, L5, L6, L5 and 6 are the prints. They can't match them to anybody, or they don't know who they belong to. There's, in addition to that, let's not forget that there's right here, there's unknown male B blood as well on the handrail, and there's also unknown DNA on the sheath. So my question for you, Jeffrey, is whether or not, like, maybe it's not public, right? Everything has been redacted 10 times to Sunday in this case. So if that's not the reason, where it's strategically being held out from public view, whether it's to protect a person, you know, not named in the case for whatever reason, if it's not that, what does that mean?
Well, you know, I'm not huge on the conspiracy theories, or
right. And I'm not trying to put you in a rough spot. I'm just curious, like, what would that mean in court? Like, what do they say about that?
It looks bad. I mean, if you have DNA that especially blood evidence that's at a scene, and you can't definitively identify who that came from, that's a concern. That opens up holes in your investigation. It opens up holes in your prosecution. And so we were talking about, you know, why do you plea a case out versus taking it to trial? And those are very potentially good reasons. I mean, if you can't identify a fingerprint at a crime scene, or if you can't identify a blood source at a crime scene, that those are concerning. Those are reasons to take a plea deal as opposed to taking it to court.
Push for a plea deal, right? Push for a plea deal. And then also, if you're wanting to, maybe if you felt like this is, you know, I didn't get the Franks motion, all this other stuff's not being allowed in trial. If you're the defendant, there's the death penalty on the table. If you take the plea, even though you waive your rights, we all know there are things that can still get you out for wrongful conviction. It takes, I think, do you know off the top of your head, Jeffrey? I Googled this after you were on the show. What is the average time for like a DNA related case? Isn't it like 15 years, 13 or 15 years to get out?
To overturn a wrongful DNA conviction?
On average, it might be getting smaller of a window now that technology is getting better, but I want to say the statistics that I looked up had seen that, or that I saw, was something like it was over a decade.
Like how long it takes to overturn a criminal conviction?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll search that up. She'll have an answer for you in just a second.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious. And then now we're going to be getting to the question that I did text you this before my last stream, and you said you're going to get your answer on Thursday to this, because this to me can really give and shed a lot of light on, and I'll just kind of cut right through any, I guess, nonsense of what I'm trying to say is this is going to cut right to the point of what we're told happened from the state didn't happen. Given this plate, I think could be a really big key clue, given the DoorDash order, given saying that they were in their sleep, right? Xana's on TikTok, Xana's fighting. Yet when we look at this plate, if she gets attacked, like the state says in their theory, that right when the door opens, how does, and I understand this might be a plastic plate, so whether it doesn't break, but how does nothing fall off? There's no sauce splatter at all. And when I zoomed in here, this is what I believe I sent you, Jeffrey. Yeah. Doesn't that look like almost like a palm print? Like, did somebody grab this from somewhere and put it on the ground? Was their hand bleeding? And does that droplet of blood look like it fell from a hand distance or a face distance? Or does that look like it dripped off right as the plate was being put on the ground?
Yeah, that's a circular blood drip stain. And that is blood that's falling off of an object under the influence of gravity, hitting the surface. It hit it about 90 degrees, so that's why it creates a circle. Inside
it hit at 90, so meaning it's coming straight. When you say 90, straight down.
Yeah, straight down. There's no angle to it. There's no tail. It's not an elliptical shape. So it's
their hand was like this, probably
going straight down. Well, now we can assume that it fell off a hand, but it could have been from a bloody nose. It could have been from a bloody lip. It could have been from a stab wound. It could have been from a bloody object like a knife after a stabbing event. It could have been, blood accumulating on the suspect's clothing and just dripping off, or it could have been one of the victims dripping blood. So there's a lot of possibilities how a drip stain could be created. Any idea whose blood that is on those samples?
I actually don't know this one off the top of my head, and I apologize, but I'm sure somebody in the Hive does. Shoot, I forget, because I pulled these slides from when I sent them to you, and I did not find out whose blood that is, but I'll keep an eye on the chat.
You look for like blood, it's called expiration blood. So blood that's coughed up, or like we were talking about the blood that looked diluted on the ping pong table or wherever they're playing that the game. That looked diluted. And so we assumed
wasn't tested, by the way.
That was not tested?
No.
That's another issue in cases too. If you have blood evidence, and especially a case like this, you're wanting to test and sample from every major blood pattern type or every individual pattern type. You're not going to go in there and swab every single surface in every single room and test that. It's just not practical. But if you see blood stains or blood evidence or blood patterns that could potentially explain an action or event like this, for example, you should swab it and test it. That would be the best practice. That doesn't always happen in every case, though, because you're thinking about the number of samples you're collecting. You're thinking about how much DNA testing costs, and it's very expensive. So if you're a small agency and you may not have the money or the resources, I mean, you could create some major problems on a big case like this where you're potentially testing hundreds, maybe even thousands of samples. But so that could even be suspect blood. So think about that. So you have
and they didn't even test it.
Yeah, if you have a drip stain that doesn't necessarily match the context of the rest of the scene, that could have very well been the suspect standing there afterwards, dripping blood off their injured hand and creates a drip stain on the ground. So that's kind of the things that I like to look for whenever I help on a case is blood stains that don't necessarily match the rest of the scene, because then you're thinking about, after all these people have been murdered, the suspect either walking away or touching items after they've been injured. And that's where you can really possibly identify a suspect in these type of cases. So that probably should have been swabbed and tested just to at least figure out whose blood it is. But if you look at the stain itself, there's like little bubbles in there possibly. And that very well could have been blood that's coming out of a nose or mouth or airway to create those little blood bubbles in there. Now, all the stuff on the napkin, that's either a combination of drip stains or blood transfers. So a bloody object touching that napkin, or blood dripping from like a face or a hand or a weapon onto the napkin.
So what about the attack? If she was holding the plate, I find the plate to be in a very odd spot, right? I understand maybe the room's messy, but was it that messy before the attack? And how did nothing fall off? Even if somebody's holding it at waist height, wouldn't you expect that to bounce and the cup of sauce same thing with the blood. Don't you expect little droplets if it fell from a higher distance, or no?
Possibly, but you also got to think about timing too. So that plate was moved to that position after that blood stain on the ground was created. So,
say that again.
So timing, that blood drip stain there and the blood stains under the plate, those were created first. And then the plate either fell on top of it or was moved on top of it. And we don't know where this is at in the investigation too. Was this the initial scene photographs before any evidence was documented? Or is this after, the crime scene was processed and things were moved around? So that's another thing we got to really look at too, because if you're including this in your reconstruction of events, you got to make 100% certain that it wasn't just an investigator that was looking for something else and picked that up and moved it to the side. So those.
Yep. Great point.
Yeah, and so a lot of times, when me and Amber were looking through the case pictures, we were trying to figure out, well, when was this picture taken? When was something else documented? So and it's confusing in this case because you don't have just the entire file from start to finish. And then, of course, things being redacted makes it very difficult to kind of put that information together.
Yeah, I totally agree. It is tough to kind of go through, everything when it's released in batches and it's half of it is a black box. And
Right.
now I know that I kind of went out of order with the shoe, or maybe I didn't go out of order with the shoe print, but we had briefly talked about that after, I think it was the day after you were on the stream, or maybe 2 days after you had posted this on YouTube, and you had said, from a pattern comparison standpoint, we're talking about the latent print found outside of Dylan Mortenson's bedroom. The shoe impression outside Dylan's room does not align with a Vans outsole. Vans footwear typically features a small, closely packed diamond pattern. The observed impression shows larger, more widely spaced diamonds, suggesting a different class of footwear, potentially a hiking shoe or boot. Comparable tread patterns can be seen in brands such as Rock and Run. Can you think of similar brands with diamond pattern outsoles? And then I showed this, and I'm going to play this again for maybe people that haven't seen this, because this is awesome. Did you draw your own blood for this, Jeffrey?
Yes. So a lot of my experiments that I have done, I'll use my
Sorry. I don't know why that was pausing. Okay, there we go.
A lot of the experiments I do, I use my own blood. So I'll let my kids draw my own blood. Amber is going to be drawing my blood here soon. She's never done any phlebotomy, so we're going to see if she can draw my blood.
That's hardcore, man. That's crazy.
Well, I know I don't have any contagious diseases, and I know it's safe to spray it around my house, so why not?
Yeah, jeez.
So that's my dining room there, where where we typically eat. So,
jeez. So you know what I'll do, actually, Jeff? Since I got you here live, I'll leave this video muted, and why don't you just explain this as it plays, as to what you're doing here?
So what I'm doing, I'm just conducting experiments. My tiles that I have in my home just happen to be the exact same tiles that were in a very violent homicide scene that I went to. And so I was just kind of preparing, just doing different experiments. And I do experiments all the time. But this one in particular, I wanted to make some footwear impressions. And so I put blood on the ground, and then I made impact patterns. And so what you're looking at on the side of my shoes is impact spatter. And this just little individual blood stains from a force event. And so I wanted to show that if somebody that is in close proximity to a beating event or an impact spatter producing event, they're going to have blood on their shoes, they're going to have blood on their clothing. It's unavoidable. And so what I'm doing now is just creating these transfers. So you're stepping in a blood source, and then every single step that you take, you'll get blood transferred to the surface. And the more steps you take, the less and less blood volume is available. So you're going to get less and less blood to show you that pattern transfer. But it does demonstrate that if you step in a blood source and you're walking away from a crime scene, you're going to make footwear impressions if there's a surface available to make it. Like, obviously, if you walk through the grass or dirt or something like that, you're not going to make pattern impressions with the blood that you can identify and then match back to a shoe. But in this scenario where you're walking across tile or laminate flooring and you step in blood, you're going to transfer blood to that surface. And the further away that you get from that blood source, the less blood volume there's going to be on that shoe or item to create those transfer patterns. That's why the impression or the possible footwear impression outside of Dylan's room is so confusing, because you don't see other bloody footwear impressions throughout the home leading up to that point. It's just that one spot. So that's extremely confusing. I mean, from an analyst perspective, that's very hard to interpret. And I still don't have a good answer for that. But when we were talking about like the class characteristics of a shoe, so the class characteristics are just the individual patterns. So like, here's a shoe that I have.
Okay.
So those intentional manufacturing patterns are characteristic of this shoe. There's no other shoe that has that same pattern. But what you look for when you're trying to identify a suspect shoe to an impression that you find at a scene is like the wear pattern. So on the back, there's a specific wear pattern associated with my shoe just because of the way I walk. Another unique shoe is this one. Does that look familiar to you guys?
I think is that a Vans shoe right there?
It is a Vans.
Okay.
So this is what we're talking about. And you want to look at that impression outside of the room. And it does have this like checkerboard or crisscross pattern inside the shoe, primarily in the heel area, which could make sense, right? I mean, if you're stepping outside of a room and you have this and you're wearing like a Vans type shoe with that crisscross pattern. But one of the reasons I said that it does not appear to be a Vans item of footwear is the class characteristics don't really match up. So you do have this like crisscross pattern here, but it's going from, you know, front to back in this direction, whereas at that scene, it looks like it would have to be oriented this way to be a Vans shoe, and you just don't see that.
So would that mean that it's going in or out of that room then?
Well, it looks like the length of the shoe is going from left to right across the screen. And
oh,
so
you're saying the pattern. I got you now. My bad.
the length of the shoe is going from left to right in that screen. So if that's the case, then it would rule out the Vans because, you know, going from left to right, if the length of the shoe, it would look like that. Whereas to match up with that pattern, it would have to be oriented this way. Yeah, we even like drew it out on a grid. We did Google reverse image searches to try to figure out the type of pattern, and what we found was like this: these hiking shoes or hiking boots would be more characteristics to that type of pattern along the length of the shoe. But that's exactly what
I have it right here.
So Amber came up with this. I can't take credit for that. She came up with that.
That's awesome.
That design idea, but it's confusing. I mean, so you can't just look at it and right away say, you know, that pattern looks like a Vans. You really have to do the analysis, and that's where I've never been trained in footwear pattern analysis, matching up the patterns, but I know the basics. I understand the concepts. So you could even drag that over and overlay it. But that's exactly what analysts do is they will, you know, they'll try to match it up to the exact shoe. And then once they have that class characteristic, which is unique to the shoe manufacturing process, then you have to look for the individual like wear patterns. So this is my kid's Van that I'm messing around with. But you can see on the back, the heel has unique wear. So if you look at the back, so everything else looks pretty good. But right here, that's where you could then do some testing and link the shoe to a crime scene. So that's kind of how it's done.
That's extremely interesting. So that's another thing too, where it just seems like, yeah, it looks like a Vans shoe. How much effort was put into identifying this, and how critical would this information be in your opinion?
Well, just considering that there's no other footwear impressions in that scene, I would find it very hard to believe that is even the suspect's shoe. I mean, maybe it is. I mean, that's possible, right? I mean, there's a bloody scene and there's a footwear impression. So, you know, you think logically, and it's like most likely that is the suspect's shoe or somebody else that stepped in the blood. But then, you know, the other thing that I think about is why in the world, especially coming out of Ethan and Zaina's room, why are there not bloody footwear impressions leading up to that point? So that is definitely a very confusing thing. But do we know for certain that wasn't created by an investigator going into the scene? Because the investigators tend to wear tactical type shoes or like.
And there are people that have said that it's a police shoe. I've heard that as well. Now, I want to focus though on what you just said with Ethan and Xana. From a cleanup standpoint, dude, how hard would it be to get every footprint out of a mess like that? Like you just walking around your kitchen and what we watched, right? The time that it would take to make sure you get it all off and the other blood that you're stepping in, wouldn't you expect to see more like a complete smearing of all of them after a while with how saturated the towel or whatever you're using to clean up would be absorbing the blood and then probably leaving streaks, right?
Yeah, clean up to where you're not going to see any evidence of blood is near impossible. And those are things that I look for, you know, scenes that I've been in where there's cleanup, it's obvious. Like, for example, one of the scenes I went to, there's like the person obviously mopped and you don't check the backside of the door. So you're like pushing the blood and liquid under the door. So it's very obvious on the backside of the door that it was mopped up. And so those are the things you look for. You look along the baseboards, you look in the grout, because the blood is just not going to disappear. It's still there, unless you have like some, industrial cleaner that's going to kill all DNA or kill all hemoglobin that's in the blood. You're not going to clean that scene up. If anything, you're just giving me more evidence to work with.
So if there's no blood trails, there's no footprints, yet there's blood on the banister, there's blood on the pong table, there's blood on the first staircase. Like, what the fuck, dude? What happened?
That makes it very confusing, and you have to then create a theory. I mean, your prosecution, your state has to have a theory that matches up with all of that. It has to incorporate all of that. Otherwise, you're introducing doubt or holes in your investigation. And so it does become very difficult to narrow down exactly what happened. And especially when there's confusing evidence. Yeah.
No, it's just it doesn't make a lot of sense at all. And what I want to finish with Ethan and Xana's room, I've had this for a while. I haven't shared it yet, but people may know Pavarotti did ask me to ask a question or two. So I had asked one about that print, but then I saw this in a different video. And Jeffrey, I sent you this actually. I think I screen recorded. I sent you this video because I wanted you to see this. And I'm not hating on Pav, but the animation skills, they're just good enough for somebody to get the point. So he starts off with the state's theory based on the documents, and then he goes into what he believes is a 2-perp crime. And I actually, I'll bite my tongue on my opinion until after you say yours. So let's see this. Hopefully this is loud enough.
Based on this, we believe the state's case, Ethan would be in bed as Xana opens the door and Kohberger attacks her all the way to the right corner of the room. Then Xana would have fought him all the way back over to the edge of the bed, and then tremendously fought him until she hit the ground and hit her head on the wall, continued to fight him as she crawled her way and fought her way over to the other part of the room. And then Kohberger goes over to Ethan who's just laying on the bed doing nothing and dispels him. Yeah, right. Give me a break. What the evidence actually shows is Ethan is on the bed. Xana opens the door holding her plate of curly fries and is attacked by the first attacker. As she goes back into the corner, fighting off the attacker, attacker number 2 then runs into the room and jumps on Ethan and begins the attack on Ethan. As Ethan is being attacked, Xana fights him to the corner of the bed and then fights till she hits the ground, her head hits the wall, continues to fight until she finally hits her resting position here.
So, there's obviously way more context throughout that video, Jeffrey, where he's showing the photos. And for people that haven't seen that, I can try to link that in the description if people do want to watch that. So obviously I'd sent you that. What was your initial thoughts on it? Is it another one of those possibility things, or where are you at?
I still believe one person could have done this.
Okay.
And that's where you need to look at your autopsy reports in detail. You need to make sure that the weapon type is consistent throughout all of the injuries on the 4 bodies. So that would be really important in this case, is, to make sure that the same weapon was actually used in all of these. The fact that there are DNA mixtures that were identified also suggests that one person was potentially involved.
Not between the 2 floors, though. Their blood was never mixed between the 2 floors. So Kaylee and Maddie's was mixed, but Ethan and Xana's never mixed with Kaylee and Maddie's. Or were you saying something else? Yeah.
Yeah. And so those are things that I would look at, though.
Right.
Do I necessarily have anything that would tell me with 100% certainty that this theory is not correct? No, I haven't seen anything that would. I don't have anything that tells me with certainty that there weren't 10 people in that house.
Right.
We just don't have that.
Right.
We're working with the evidence that we have and the information that we have. But those are things I would look at. I would look at the injury types on the bodies. Are they all consistent? Was the same weapon type used? Like I said, I would test more items of evidence to see if there were DNA mixtures. Evidence of a struggle in the room. I mean, think about how long that takes to, struggle with somebody. Not very long. So could somebody have struggled with her and then gone over and killed him? Yes, that's possible. Or could, somebody have been, or could she have been badly injured to the point where she's not able to fight back, and then, he's killed and then going back to her and continuing to assault her? That's possible too. And that would account for, what looks like a struggle or evidence of blood in multiple parts of the room. Because somebody that's actively injured, they're not just going to stand still. That's just not going to happen.
I believe that it was said too that Ethan never moved from the bed. So whatever injuries that he got right away were all the pooling, and you've seen the infamous photo of it running through. I think I showed you last time where it's running out of the exterior foundation on the house. And the massive amount of blood pooling. Cause I think you actually said right away before you knew this, you're like, somebody was probably dead in that bed, right?
Yeah. And everything that I've seen so far, the blood patterns, the information, the evidence, I believe that exactly, that he was injured there and died there, that he did not get up, did not move around the room.
And their blood, I don't believe their blood was, we got to see the full, I don't know. It's tough, man, because everybody gets super into their opinion, right? Mm-hmm. You have all of this experience with it, right? We've absolutely obsessed over this. So there's things, right? But in your opinion, you're saying you could believe that one person could do it. Now, Jeffrey, just to clear up, not to speak for you, you're not saying, given everything with the totality in that necessarily. He said a handful of times tonight, that doesn't seem likely. Excuse me. But from a standpoint of just sheer, what's the word that I'm looking at? Brutality, right? You've probably been on a scene where one person has taken out multiple victims like this. Yeah. So I can see why you would say it's possible for somebody to do this. Now, if we add on a bunch of other stuff, that's why I think Jeffrey said in a courtroom, how are people going to answer that? What's their theory? The state never even gave their theory. They said, we're not going to give it because you can't believe a word that comes out of Brian Koberger's mouth. And yet the only words out of his mouth were, I can't wait to be exonerated. And yes, I did this.
Yeah. And, when I first started looking into this case, or when I first started hearing about it, I couldn't believe that, 4 years later, people are still talking about the details. I mean, like, not even just like the case in general as it being horrible, but like every little detail. And it's because, people still don't have answers. And like I was saying, even the family has questions still. I mean, they probably have the same questions that you guys have. Like, how exactly did this happen? How does all the evidence fit in? What exactly happened to my children? I'm sure they would like to know, just to set their minds at ease. And so I understand why you guys are still going over this and still asking these questions. It's totally understandable.
I think that it's a pleasant surprise too, to hear how you said your interaction was with some of the family members, that they weren't necessarily offended and that they liked kind of the discussion and the back and forth around it, which to me, I think when you had said that, I was like, oh God, like, how was it? You're like, no, it wasn't anything bad by any means. And
not bad at all. Her mom was very nice, very, very pleasant, very, it was a good conversation, and we still talk. So, I of course feel bad because, thinking about my own family and, the families that I've dealt with, over the years working cases, it's like that's a lot to go through. And, I can't even imagine, having to still hear about this every day, but I still, my impression, and, I definitely do not want to speak for the family, but I think they still have questions and they want answers too, and, just because you have, who you believe in custody, it still doesn't give you that feeling of justice, or like you have all the answers. And so that's again, why I really like doing this stuff, is to hopefully, explain it to the public, explain it to the families, just so they can, set their mind at ease. And also, it gives you faith in your police agencies and investigations, because everything we hear, it's it's like, it's all the mistakes that police agencies make. But, you know, when you like analyze the evidence in detail and you see like, oh yeah, they did the very best they could. They processed the scene correctly. They, you know, gave a correct theory that, you know, fits into all the evidence. But, you know, when you start losing faith in your police agencies is when you feel like you're not given all the information or things are being withheld. You know, you're getting reports that are redacted and you're like, well, why would you redact that? You know, what does that have anything to do with the investigation?
Right.
So, you know, that's, you know, I like to, you know, if I can confirm what the police have done, confirm their investigation, be like, no, they did a great investigation. It's solid. You know, I don't see any holes in it. And so then it restores faith in police agencies versus, you know, creating more doubt.
Well, yeah. And that's what too. It's like, people have to keep in mind, we've had 2.5+ years looking into this for a long time. Like this stream on YouTube alone has existed for a year straight doing this.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's an entire 1.5 years before that. So you're now looking into this for a week. I think you've done a really good job, you know, having your opinions on it, having, you know, you're open about what you don't know, what you need to see. And I think that that's a good time to kind of segue us into the questions that people have submitted. And so Sadie had said, welcome back. I can't wait to hear what he has to say after he's had some time to look into the case. And Law Cheek says, what about the original 911 passed out person? We kind of touched on that in the beginning, where one of the things you said that was very interesting is that the cops are at a complete disadvantage when they show up to a quadruple homicide. If somebody did know there was 4 people dead and they called for an unconscious person, because what if the person's still there with a weapon?
Right. That'd be my concern as an officer. I understand why officers respond out to scenes and, you know, it's something minor, but they'd still get their guns out because it's like, you don't know what you're getting into. And, you know, if you're, you know, imagine these officers now after going to the scene and, knowing the, you know, how much public scrutiny there's been. And, you know, do you think they're going to respond to another unresponsive person the same way? No, they're going to be like on edge. They're going to be ready to go. And so it definitely impacts, you know, probably their demeanor and how they investigate cases now, for sure.
And chuck it in the fuck it bucket. That's a funny username. Said, if only we could see the facial expressions. Yeah. Have you ever seen body cam as redacted or blurred out, or documents as redacted as this for a local small town stabbing?
It's quite a bit. I mean, it's, but, you know, I kind of get it too. You know, it's, you know, people that are on scene, they don't want, you know, to be public, but everybody's already public already. I mean, we can identify all the cops that are there. We can identify all the EMS personnel. We know every kid that was there. So it's like, at this point, what's the point of redacting or, you know, preventing, especially the families from having access to this information, you know?
Right. I
mean, forget about, you know, the public is one thing. You know, I know as a public we expect information and we should get it. I mean, if everybody's doing things right, you should get that information. But
I agree.
Family especially, I mean, they should have all the information. They should be able to set their minds at ease and know that the police did a solid investigation, know that, you know, the prosecutors did everything they could, but it doesn't sound like that's the case.
Right. I agree. And Blue Eyed Candy said, reenacting quote stabbing. This is going back to the ISP report that I talked about prior to walking kind of through the 40,000 foot view of the house, right where all the blood was found. Blue Eyed Candy said, reenacting quote unquote stabbing itself is more than just raising your arm up and down, right? Along with literal disfigurement done to KG. How do you account for that? So I'll kind of hopefully read between the lines of what Blue Eyed Candy is saying is, when you're reenacting a crime scene like that, what is, because obviously are they stabbing a mannequin? Are they just using their fist? Do you know what that would look like? Or
see, that's where, you know, if you're really wanting to try to do a reenactment that can be useful or provide good information, I would put somebody of similar size, similar weight in the positions where you think they were. I would make them wear like white shirts. And if you have a theory on how this suspect did it, you know, get a fake knife, put some fake blood on it, go over and make them stab the person, right? Essentially assault them. And the number of times that they said, then making them go to the next person, make that person fight back, and then see what's transferred to that that suspect's clothing, but make them work. Don't, if you want to do a true reenactment, then go 100%. You don't want to just, put a mannequin and just say, well, it took me 2 minutes to get through the scene. You really want to do everything you can to make it as realistic as possible, because that's how you're going to convince your jury, like, yes, this is possible. We had this person here, we just, assaulted them, and then we had this person here, but we made them fight the suspect back and made them overpower that person and then go on to the next room. And so that's how you would do a true reenactment, to really get as much information as you can out of it. But if you screw up your reenactment and if you do, if you don't account for all these different variables, then it really can open up holes in your case.
And I just think about what a minute and a half is to go into a house that you don't know, sprint up the stairs, 110 stab wounds. Just how long would it take for you to do this on the table, even sprint downstairs in a house you don't know? A 6'3" man, who's on 260 NGL of Adderall that was found in the toxicology, and Xana's fighting them off it's unbelievable in my world. It's unbelievable. I just don't see it. Yeah, and it's like a full sprint, dude.
Yeah, and I think, defending that detective or whoever was doing that reenactment, I think that they, weren't necessarily saying that this is exactly how it played out, but if I'm going full speed, what is the least amount of time that somebody could spend in that house versus, if I slow it way down, how long could they potentially be in that house and carry this out?
It increased by a minute. Well, whatever. We already went over that. I think we're all on the same page. It seems extremely fast. And so Thoughts Loading and Shockface says, we may all have different theories, but listening to Jeffrey makes me feel like we're being validated just a wee bit. We're not crazy. Question everything. Trust nothing. And I think that that's one of the things that I saw as feedback from the first time that you were on the stream, is people love that you're able to have this conversation and at least entertain it. Maybe not necessarily give your own personal conclusion. Obviously, you're still practicing as you have your job and you're still doing this. So I can appreciate it. You come on, you give us your time and you answer what might be dumb questions to you, but you flip it in a way where you're like, this helps me when I have to testify, and you get used to the odd questions.
And I think it's good for people to question everything. I mean, that's your right as a citizen. You should be able to question everything, and you should expect to get answers to these hard questions. And if somebody can't explain it, then I think it's natural to ask why. Why can't you explain that? And so that's what I'm trying to do by doing this, is just show people that sometimes it's pretty darn hard. I mean, when you're working these big cases and you have a lot of information and things that don't make sense, it gets very difficult. But if you're saying that you are an investigation agency and that's your job is to work cases and document evidence and process it and prepare for court, then you should be able to do so.
I agree with that. And there are some super chat questions that we already got to, but D-Dog Wifey said, Jeffrey, you rock. And D-Dog Wifey, thank you for the big super chat. You rock for that. People love the Dexter shirt, dude.
Oh, thanks. I figured I'd go a little more relaxed today. Plus, you guys can see my little chalk outline body tattoos.
Oh, I love that. Dude, you're a pro's pro, man. You're drawing your own blood to do blood spatter footprints in your own kitchen. I mean, you got the chalk outline tattoos. That's awesome, man. So Claudia, I think you could say this in a yes or no question, or you can answer this with a yes or no, but do you believe that there was a cleanup?
I have not seen anything in the evidence, the pictures, that would make me, say with certainty that there was cleanup.
Outside of the defense expert, so outside of the defense's expert stating there's no way, right? So, but you are saying from what you've just seen, take the experts, what they've said, but from what you've seen, that's crazy, man. You've brought up good points every time that I've asked the question around it. So
yeah, there would be evidence of it. And for me, I like, I don't really like the absolutes. I mean, if it's something that I can prove with 100% certainty, like for example, if I have an impact pattern on a wall and it's the victim's DNA, I can tell you exactly where that person was, or pretty darn close to where that person was assaulted, I can tell you what direction the blood was traveling. I can tell you that that blood came from that impact event. So there are things that you can explain with 100% certainty, but then there are things that you can't. Like, can I say 100% certain that there was no cleanup? Because I know I haven't seen every bathroom. I haven't seen, all the sinks, and that's where people would typically clean up.
They're just as clean.
Yeah, and so then that would suggest that there wasn't. And
what does that mean then? Well, and there's so many questions. I want to get through what I've been asking you enough questions, but I want to get through.
I love the questions, and Amber is. I got to give Amber credit because she asks me this stuff all the time, and so I'm like, well, shit, I don't know. And so I have to be a little more professional on here. But me and her are like back and forth, and I'm like, I have no clue what are you even talking about, and so we go back and forth about this stuff all the time. So it, she's the reason I'm prepared for this.
Amber's been great. She's sent us some slides too for us here at the end to go through. But Third Apache said, thanks, Jeffrey. We have tons more questions. Maybe a third appearance in the future. Maybe bring Amber along as well.
Amber's right here. She's sitting right next to me if you guys want to say hi.
Hi, Amber. That's awesome. And Hive, Jeffrey and I, we do chat, we do text. I think that it'd be epic, Jeffrey. I mean, I know we've mentioned it in the past, maybe a bi-weekly or a monthly thing as, you get up to speed on this, having you come on the stream. I would love for that if you'd be willing and able.
I think it's great. And I really enjoy educating. I mean, that's what I do. I mean, I like teaching. I like sharing my experiences, and I think it makes everybody better. It helps the public to understand what investigations are actually like. Plus, it makes police agencies better because they realize that people are going to be asking tough questions, and then you're going to have experts analyzing this stuff. So I don't think that I do consider the fact that it does put the family through more trauma, and so I always take that into consideration. But learning that the families have questions too, I think it's a beneficial thing all the way around. And so I don't see any harm in analyzing cases at all.
Right. There's a way to go about it too, right? There's a good way, or there's a right way, and there's a wrong way to go about it. And I think that we are doing it the right way. Absolutely. Uncle Daddy 001, we touched on this briefly last time. If anybody didn't see that, we had asked about the lack of the blood on the knife sheath and the 8-hour plus time. Now, you had said something that kind of was surprising to me, but you said that sheath was there and it was set down prior to the attack beginning.
That's exactly right.
Because you said that it was blood rain was the terminology you used. If you want
to that's not a term that is used. Like, I would not put blood rain in my technical report, but I wanted to. So it's blood spatter. So whenever an impact event occurs, like a stabbing, blood is going to go up, out, and away from the source, and it's going to kind of rain down on objects that are nearby. That's why you see those little individual blood stains, because the force of the stabbing event or the beating event broke those little blood drops into the small enough drops to almost look like a mist or a rain. And the only way you're going to get that is if you're in close proximity to that assault. And so they came down at about a 90-degree angle, so that makes sense. They're all circular for the most part, so you don't see any stains that are coming down at angles. So it means that it had to have been there when this assault was occurring. And you don't see blood inside the knife sheath. So, whoever the suspect was or whoever had the knife didn't try to put the knife back in the sheath. And why they left that there, I have no idea. I mean, I've thought about this a lot. And, whatever motivation this person had for going into that home, it had to have been disrupted at some point. So I don't think this person planned on everything playing out the way it did. I think they went in there with a specific goal in mind. I don't know what that is. I think it, might have been, a weird motive. But, they had to have been disrupted at some point. And then also, if they're seeing, Dylan in the doorway on the way out, why was she spared and nobody else was? That's another thing. And I just think that this person's plan, whatever it was, was disrupted. And so that's kind of one of the only opinions that I'll give, I guess, is, that, and that's just my speculation, that, something had to have been disrupted. Their original plan had to have been disrupted to, cause them to, one, spare someone's life, and then, kill multiple people when maybe that wasn't their initial intent? I'm not sure. That's a question I have for sure.
I have a weird theory, and I know without kind of crossing that conspiracy line, I'm going to try to articulate this in a way of if I walked into this and I saw, okay, there's a little bit of that blood rain, the made up term, not the official term that you're talking about on the sheath. And the sheath looks very new, and they never found the murder weapon. My thought would be, was that a knife that one of the girls had for protection, and it doesn't look used because maybe it just sat in a drawer or under their mattress? And did the knife end up getting taken from one of them during a struggle, and was the sheath under the cover already? And that's why there's not as much blood on it as you might expect.
And we can't rule that out, right? I mean, that's another question that, we don't 100% know the answer to. I mean, I think I saw that BK did buy a knife similar to that at some point.
Allegedly, there was an Amazon receipt, but
are there serial numbers or anything to 100% match that knife sheath to him? No. And so it is up for interpretation. It's circumstantial evidence. It's not like necessarily a 100% forensic link. Now, the DNA on the knife sheath, that is a forensic link. That's a forensic link from him to that scene. But the knife sheath in itself, we don't know. We're pretty certain, right? I mean, that somebody took that into the scene and utilized it. But that's another thing that we can't say with 100% certainty where that knife sheath came from.
Right. Yeah. We could go down this whole rabbit hole on IGG and the chain of custody. Here's how I want to wrap up the sheath thing. Sorry, Hive. I meant just the sheath thing. You
got me as long as you want me tonight.
I love that.
My daughter was in here. Oh, she's still in here. She's in the room too. Hanging out.
You're super generous with your time, and thank you for that. So given all of the evidence, and it didn't go to trial, but it does seem as if how little of a deep dive investigation they've done into other people. Like, it seems like once they got the IGG tip, everything was kind of similar to the point I made about OJ, right? And they didn't give the theory, and then it never went to trial. And then we talk about maybe the psychology of why the prosecution wouldn't push for the trial, and they'd push for the plea deal because of some of the holes that could be poked in it. If you had to give your, I don't know, an unbiased take, 40,000 foot view, given being a crime scene expert, and you put yourself in a jury's mind, do you believe that a jury would have found reasonable doubt if everything was presented in a very methodical way of evidence in the living room, evidence on the stairs, and timeline, things like that?
That's difficult to say because, there is forensic evidence tying him to the scene. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence, his history, that makes him a logical suspect. And so would the defense be able to, utilizing some of this information, like, for example, a fingerprint that couldn't be identified, potential other male DNA sources, not knowing exactly, with 100% certainty how this played out? And, did he go up the stairs, come back down the stairs? Did he assault people in certain locations? Is that enough room? All these kids' interactions with each other and the history, the bar before, things that were said that might be questionable coming from the bar. Is that enough to override there being a forensic link from him to that scene? I don't know.
Right.
All it takes is one jury member to feel the same as like you guys and your guests, and so it's really hard to say. It could potentially really hurt the case.
Right. And so, oh darn, there was a good point that you just brought up that I wanted to dive into more. If I remember it, I'll come back to it. Why don't we talk about this though? So Jeffrey, you were talking about how you've been getting up and running on social media. I will have Jeffrey's channel posted in the description. And then you have what's called evidence over assumption. And this is what I'd like to take a second here, Hive. Obviously Jeffrey, very generous with his time. He's been on last week. He's been on this week. He's going to be coming back on. Jeffrey and Amber were kind enough to give us 20% off if you use the code THEBIRD on evidenceoverassumption.com. I love that.
Amber came up with that. I cannot take credit. She's like, what do you think of the bird? And I was like, I don't know. And she's like, I'm going with it. So
that's amazing.
It's fantastic.
It is. That is fantastic. And so there's a self-paced online course into death investigation, right? Information to obtain during a forensic death investigation. Jeffrey was talking about that a little bit before, about what type of spatters, how you can identify it. And then what people are very excited about for the last time is you have unique, one-of-a-kind crime scene action figures that you're also promoting here. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this, and I'll kind of give you the floor here.
Okay. So the website, evidenceoverassumption.com, that's everything that we've been talking about, right? It's, you're looking at the evidence. That's my job, is to look at the evidence and talk about the possibilities. So I'm not just making assumptions. I'm actually looking at the evidence and trying to explain things based on the evidence. So that's why sometimes I can't give you a solid answer, because if the evidence isn't there, then we can't, give you 100% certainty. But the classes on the website right now, I've got a blood pattern analysis course, which I would highly recommend for a lot of your guests, just so they can see how these blood patterns are created. And then I've also got a death investigation course that talks about the way deaths are investigated. I have a suicide investigation course that I'm going to be putting on too, as well as a forensic science course. So if you want to learn more about the different forensic science disciplines, kind of how crime scenes are worked, those are all really good classes to take. And then the action figures, I make these myself. So I told you I'm a nerd. I can't help it. But here's one. This is I don't know if you can see it.
It's a little blurry.
Yeah, this is the body in a dumpster. So
Jesus, that's crazy.
And then that's the fire investigation one.
Wow. And these are available on your website.
Yep. Yeah. So
okay.
I've got whole sets of them, but I make these. I just started making them one day for fun, and I really enjoy it. This is my skeletal remains recovery one.
I got to get some of those for the table back here.
But yes, I custom make them, and I don't know. I just, a lot of people try to get away from their work when they go home, but I really like it. I've been doing it for 20 years. It's a big part of my life. I think it's interesting. Other people are interested in it, and so not only do I do the work, but I also really enjoy teaching and giving back and trying to educate others. So Amber exclusively runs the website. I can't thank her enough. I know I mention her a lot, but I couldn't do this without her. So if you guys are happy with what I'm doing, it's a lot because Amber has set me up to do this kind of stuff. I just get on and talk and do all my thing, whereas she does all the back end, and she stays up late at night while I'm sleeping and working on the website. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. And I will echo that to Mrs. Birdie as well, helping me out. And Crop Duster 22. That's one of my favorite usernames in the Hive, Jeffrey.
This Crop Duster 21 and 20. I mean, come
on. So this is a great question, actually. So Crop Duster said, Jeffrey, my daughter is studying forensic psychology. Do you think your courses would benefit her?
Absolutely. I'm a huge advocate of any education, and forensic psychology is fantastic. That's a great career path. But if you're going to be a forensic psychologist and possibly interviewing suspects, criminals, you do have to understand the investigative process, and you have to understand a lot of the different individual forensic disciplines. Like, a lot of people make the mistake, like, for example, death investigators like myself, they will just exclusively study death investigation, whereas they don't branch out and study bloodstain pattern analysis, or they don't branch out and study like police procedures or forensic science procedures. And I think that's a mistake, because you see in cases like this, it incorporates everything. It's not just the coroner, it's not just the police investigators, not just the forensic scientists, it's everybody. And so that whole investigation is going to be scrutinized. And if you have investigators that don't understand the entire investigative process, you're at a huge disadvantage. So I'm an advocate of everybody becoming certified, everybody getting as much information and knowledge as possible. And is it a threat to me? No, because I love doing this stuff and I love teaching. And, the better that people are around you, the better you're going to be as an analyst and investigator. So I urge people to go out and get as much information and education as they can.
And so Hive, as a reminder, 20% off if you use the code THEBIRD, and also available on evidenceoverassumption.com. I'll put this full screen one more time. There are those custom action figures. There's the code if you want to screenshot this. And again, thank you for the 20%. And I have two more questions. Okay. One, this is just kind of scratching my own itch here. Is it a little bit weird that one of the detectives was recognized by the U.S. Secret Service on April 1st of 2024, Detective Lawrence Mowry, for exceptional achievement in digital forensics and cybercrime investigation? He went through 76 terabytes of data across 261 devices. It was the highest ranking among NCIF graduates in his region, and it took place in Moscow. And the Idaho 4 case has 76 terabytes of data. What the hell? Does that seem weird?
I mean, I tell them congratulations. That's a lot of information.
I mean, why would that be needed in such a close?
So, but think about the case and just its entirety. So every single time that somebody says something to the police or tells them, oh, I saw this weird guy following the girls at a taco truck or a food truck, right? They can't just dismiss it. They have to collect that person's phone, collect their computers, see what they were doing. And so it potentially opens up a huge amount of work, and digital data especially is not easy to analyze. So
I just think it's an absurd amount.
It does seem crazy, but when you think about, that, these are 4 people that have a lot of close associations. They have family, they have friends, they were all hanging out together. They, and you have to rule out all of those people, and you're collecting a ton of evidence. You're documenting a lot. You're going through everything, because initially, I mean, for a long time, you don't have a suspect.
Yeah.
And so, I kind of sympathize with them a little bit too, because like once you finally get somebody, you're like, finally, we have something to focus on versus just this broad investigation. But then, the other side of things is you can't just, even though you have that person, you can't just shut down the rest of the investigation, because you're still going to be getting tips. You still have to follow up on leads. You still have to test evidence, process evidence. And if that means it takes 5-10 years to go to court, well, so be it.
Right.
You got to, trust the investigative process and rule people out that way. It, provides appropriate answers.
I was saying it more so in comparison, right? So it took 30 days for Koberger to be arrested. In 30 days, 9/11 only had 33 terabytes. 3.5 million pages of Epstein only has 300 gigs. I'm saying in comparison, it's like, whoa, what the hell is going on here? That's really what I meant. Like,
yeah. And it is a lot of information. I mean, look at all the body cam videos, all the camera footage, the reconstructions. It's a lot of digital evidence.
Yeah.
I can't say, exactly how it compares, across the different cases. It does sound like a lot, but, thinking about it from the perspective of this is a huge case, I can see how there would be a lot of digital evidence.
Now, the last question, and I've been waiting to ask you this one. So as far as your own personal career, would you be willing to share what's the wildest, craziest crime scene you've ever been to?
Oh my God. I've been to a lot. I can't, since I'm actively working still, I can't, share case details.
That's right.
I've been to some crazy ones. I mean, in the last 20 years, I've, been out to, probably at least 3,000 death scenes.
Wow.
I've prepared more than 4,000 death investigation reports. I've been to, I think it's like 300 plus homicides now. So I've seen a lot. And it's all different type of injuries, different events. So, everything from traffic accidents to overdoses to, anything you can think of. I feel like I've seen everything. I mean, I do have some that definitely stand out. And so,
is there any, can you share any light on it? Like,
Oh gosh, some of the multiple scenes where there's multiple people at the scene, those are really challenging. Like for example, I've had car accidents where like 4 or 5 people are in the car and they burn. So then, not only are you trying to figure out who these people are, but you're figuring out where they're coming to and from, and then you have to go through the process of identification, and then you have 5 different families that you're working on, and that's just one case of many that you're actively working on. So the other cases don't just stop coming in. I mean, if you think that this area was free of crime or free of police reports leading up to that and then after it, absolutely not. So it's just one case of many that you're working, and so it does become very challenging.
Have you ever had a suspected, just randomly, have you ever had a suspected serial killer?
Yes.
Really?
I mean, if you look up, I mean, my information is public. I mean, you can look up anything you want about me. But there was a case of a guy that killed 3 people over a period of time. That's the legal definition of a serial killer is 3 or more murders over a period of time where it's cooling off in between. I think that's the FBI definition of a serial killer.
I think you're right.
So there was a case locally where a guy had killed somebody in one area and then killed another couple people and buried them on his property. And but that's all. It's all in the news. It's public information. So, I mean, anybody could look that up and do their research on it. But yeah, so kind of interesting. But I mean, have I had thoughts before? Like there was one year where like people just, it seemed like there was a lot of drownings in canals. And so I thought, this is really weird. I mean, why are there so many? And I always had the suspicion like maybe somebody was harming people. But again, that's just a theory. I mean, was there any
gut feeling?
Yeah. Was there any like fact that could substantiate that thought? No. But I think if you talk to any like death investigator or crime scene investigator, they're all going to have things where it's like, well, this was a little weird. I mean, there could have been more to it.
Smiley face killer is one that in the Midwest. Have you heard of that? Up in like the La Crosse area? The smiley face killer is always very popular, usually associated with some sort of frat organization. So popular young men that will wander off from a bar or a party alone and end up in a body of water, and there's always no foul play suspected. There was a Hive, help me out. Who was the dude in Nashville? Riley Gaines. Have you heard of that case? Certainly looked like a smiley face killer, but it's always people see them leave, they stumble out and they end up drowned. And there's always a smiley face. People find a smiley face near the bodies is the whole how that started.
Okay. I was going to say, how do you know it's not just, I mean, college person intoxicated walking away from a bar and goes and falls in a waterway?
There was a cluster. So if you look into it in the Midwest, it was like there was a cluster, and to your point, there was these cooling off periods, and it was a cluster. It was like from Minneapolis to La Crosse was big. I think Green Bay, and it's gone on for I think maybe 2 decades.
Well, so
maybe longer.
The investigative side of me, and normally the way I am, I don't usually entertain like the side theories, but to me, I'm like, nah, that's nonsense. But then when you find out years later that this has happened multiple times, multiple areas, like they just identified another one of Ted Bundy's victims just recently.
Right.
So is it out of the realm of possible? No, it's definitely possible.
Have you seen the Fox Hollow Farms documentary on Hulu?
Yes, that one's crazy. I was just telling Amber we got to watch that. That's a really good one.
Dude, that was when I was in my full-on tinfoil hat conspiracy, and I was doing like facial overlays of the current owner of Fox Hollow, and I'm like,
that crazy dude that was associate of his, to say that guy was not involved, there's no way.
There's no way. And also, so here's kind of a cool fact, and I've made this announcement to the Hive. I had to sign an NDA as far as when it's going to come out, but they're going back to do a second documentary, and they're using I think 4 or 5 of like the TikToks that I did that
really,
yeah. So it's really cool. Like I was talking to the producers on the phone. I've met with all of them, or not met with them, but I've talked on the phone and video chatted, and I think it's coming out sooner rather than later, but I'm very, very excited to see what it is. Cause they went back after how that documentary completely blew up online. That's really a crazy one too, because, And I want to be careful because I will say that's the only case that I've ever started making videos on where I pissed the family off big time. So like directly reached out to me. So I'll be careful. But there's a lot of sus stuff as far as like when the original owner disappeared and how he was identified. They took a picture of his hand across the border of Canada and they had his own brother identify it. And then that same year, there was a guy with I'm pretty sure it's the same name, or Rob Graves is his name now, the current owner, Rob Graves, started working at an Audi dealership the same year within a couple of weeks, and they look alike. They look so alike. It's crazy.
That's a great case. That's cool. You're a part of that.
Yeah, no, it was random too. And did I say Riley Gaines? I meant Riley Strain. My bad. Is Riley Gaines like a swimmer? I meant Riley Strain. But no, Jeffrey, this was a lot of fun, man. And we'll have you back on, in a week or two. Hive, type of one, if you enjoyed this, show Jeffrey some love. Make sure you go check out Evidence Over.
It is my birthday Saturday too. So
hey, and happy birthday.
I'm almost 47.
That a boy. Love that. That's exciting, man. Well, I hope you have a fantastic weekend celebrating with your kid and Amber, and I'm looking forward to having you back on. Hive, we're going to continue to get Jeffrey fully up to speed. Just keep in mind, he's looked at this case for about a week and a half. There's a ton of evidence, ton of documents. I'm doing my best too, in addition to prepping every night stream, trying to send Jeffrey some stuff, trying to text and show him. So we'll keep working at it. But Jeffrey, I think I speak on behalf of all of us. Super grateful and thankful for you to have spent almost 3 hours with us tonight. Thank you again.
Amber just proposed a question. So it
what
says,
has Amber got?
All right. So if there are all these holes in the state's evidence, why did the defense ask for a plea?
But isn't there something legally where technically the defense can't ask for a plea? And either way, I don't disagree with that. It is weird. Why would they ask for a plea? Is it because they wanted to get the death investigation off? Was Brian being threatened? I find it interesting to answer Amber's question. Probably my number one is that the second Koberger's sister went onto the prosecution's witness list. That's when the plea deal was accepted. So I'm not sure. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know. That might be a topic for our next.
That would be a good one. I think we should. I think you want to know would be interesting, Jeffrey and Hive. Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you're watching this on replay. It'd be interesting to go over. Maybe you pick your top 3 things that you would say would have the most what's the word, like subjectivity?
Yeah, subjectivity.
Yeah, like you pick your top 3 where you could see, okay, this is what I would maybe dial in on, and then I'll pick my 3 to be interesting to see if we have any of that overlap.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I mean, you brought up things that I hadn't even thought of, or that I haven't even found, and so. But then I think I've asked you a couple questions too that you had to look into a little more, like that image of the person walking over to the dumpster and throwing something away.
Right.
I don't know who that person was or how that fits into the equation, or
the blood at the whites you had asked me about.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. That was a lot more blood than I had anticipated you showing me. So
we could do a call-in show too, man, where we could have people call in and ask you a question. That could be fun.
I'm completely fine with that. I love this. I like the critical thought process. So I like being tripped up, and I would rather be tripped up now during a podcast versus when I'm testifying in court.
Amen to that, brother. Amen to that. And well, dude, we are going to sign off. Thank you again. Hive, you guys rock. Hit the like button. Make sure you guys go subscribe to @Jeffrey Gentry BPA. Check out Evidence Over Assumption. And then also don't forget, join Hive Plus if you want to use the emojis. Let's light up the chat to close us out with the God damn it, Jeff Birdie emojis. And with that, Hive, I will see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central. Cheers, Jeffrey. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life.